What is up, guys? Henry Kilbane here. My most recent guest, Fernando Habegger, aka JNandez, came onto the show and dropped some absolute bombs. Another 3-hour conversation, but honestly, I think you guys are just going to be absolutely consumed by what he has to talk about, and by the time you've wrapped up the 3 hours, it's going to feel like no time has passed whatsoever. We go deep into mental models, making 6 figures in poker, transitioning into business, and plus so much more about life in general and just all of these little life hacks that JNandez has learned along the way. Honestly, I had an absolute blast. Massive shout out to Fernando as always. And guys and girls at home, if you could please just hit that like and subscribe button, it really helps us reach a larger audience. And from the feedback that we've been given so far on the value of these conversations, obviously we want to achieve that by reaching more people. Enjoy this conversation. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about it in the comments afterwards. And yeah, get your notepads out because this one is worth taking notes on. Peace.
A lot of the things that I'm learning are too fresh to talk about because I don't really like to pretend that I know more than I do. So when if I were to like talk about, hey, look guys, here's how you build a business and how you make it all work. Most of the audience wouldn't connect. B, I'm like a new poker player in business, kind of like learning a new skill set, not ready to talk too much about. But I think what's interesting is that where the world sort of connect is in the mindset behind it, because it's all self-taught and a lot of it comes through experience, and a lot of the mistakes and failures you have along the way are kind of similar in terms of the way you want to process them. So I think that there is some ground to be shared, but it needs to be more refined. It's not like hey, look what I do on a day-by-day basis, here is good content. It has to be more refined so I can connect with other people on it. And I think an Insta story or a casual video or a vlog just won't cut it, basically.
I love that. There's a couple of things I want to touch on there. So firstly, separating business and poker and your role as a ambassador of the game, if you will, where you are putting out content to promote your business and whatnot, but ensuring that you have separated the kind of private life that you're living as well, saving a little bit of that anonymity, because anonymity is a privilege, obviously. And when you do put yourself in the public eye, whether it's through playing poker on stream, where it's running a business that's under your name, your whole brand has been built off of your screen name and whatnot, having that bit of privacy, I think is really important. Because like you said, we're all very guilty of showing the highlights, the top 1% of our lives on social media. And that has obviously, especially over the last 5 years, had a very detrimental impact on mental health. People now, it fascinates me that in 2022, we are more depressed now as a society than ever in the history of mankind. And it's fairly obvious why. If you're looking at Instagram lives, right? Instagram stories of people that you idolize and whatnot, instead of being grateful for what you have and the stuff that you're working towards and, everything that you have around you, instead you're seeing the difference of what everyone else has compared to your life. And you're basically hitting the minus percent. So say, I'm looking at 10 out of 10 lives on Instagram and mine's an 8. I'm feeling the -2 rather than the actual 8 out of 10. And a lot of people are very guilty of that. The second thing that you pointed at, which really fascinates me, because I feel like I personally would love to see the journey of this beginner's mindset that you're taking, where, straight away, one of the first things you said is, hey, I'm new to this. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to pretend to be some fake business guru. We know there are plenty of those on social media. But do you not think that having that humility and self-awareness that you've shown would also, sorry, how do I want to phrase this? Would actually benefit people, where people could see the mistakes that you're making now as a businessman, where you're like, hey guys, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I've played poker my entire life. I'm now segueing into business. I'm going to fuck up. And, I'm happy to hold up my hands and admit that I'm going to make mistakes along the way. Do you not think that that would be really valuable content, or are you still not just ready to jump into that?
I would say it would be valuable, but it would also hold me personally back on my journey of just improving myself, because kind of the easiest thing to do when it comes to trying to provide value is to learn something yesterday that you teach today, like a day after, basically. Oh, I just heard about this thing. Well, here's a piece of content. I'm really smart. Check this out, you know? And I think it just comes better if you actually lived it, basically, and have not only heard about it and read about it, but also lived it, essentially. So, for example, in business, there are tons of business books in comparison to, for example, poker. I mean, there are also a lot of poker. There's a lot of poker content, but the experiences you make in business are a lot wider spread, essentially, because it's such a bigger field. And there's so much to learn, but the most meaningful experiences that I think are worthwhile sharing afterwards are the things you live through, not the things that came through the book. And then connecting a story with a concept and letting people know, this is the way I learned about this skill set, or the importance of this concept, or as we might discuss today, like this mental model actually made a lot more sense once I was actually in the heat of the moment, or once I was trying to do this or do X. And it also reminds me of an advice I recently heard, which is you generally want to read about topics that you're practicing right now, and not about things that you plan on doing in the future. So, for example, reading about how to improve meditation is it's not almost worthless, but what's the point? Like, it's much better if you already are meditating and then read about improving meditation, because then you actually know what you're reading about. Otherwise, it's so hard to actually understand the subject, but you might sound pretty smart. You know, you can just take the same ideas from the book and just say, like, I know exactly how to improve your meditation. Here, do this, 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 and this, even though you've never done it. And that's easier than ever today in this sort of knowledge society, where you can just read up on a lot of topics without actually knowing and experiencing it. Or in poker, it's like, I heard about this GTO concept. This is how you implement it, you know? And it's like, well, what are the results, you know? Like, have you lived through that? Have you tried to implement this on a consistent basis? Or in poker, it could also be something like, you know, routine is everything. Wake up early, you know, hustle, I don't know, cold bath, whatever it could be. But have you lived through it? Do you understand what it actually means to do that? And do you actually understand the benefits for yourself? Or you just read up on it and it sounds good on paper, and now you share it? Like, I think here's my challenge to people listening to this. Take any step towards improvement. For example, you take a cold shower, whatever, right? Benefits aside, don't post it anywhere. Just do it, you know? Because I think we are all triggered by the idea of, oh, now that I'm doing it, let me post it because I can get more value of the activity. I can, one, experience the value of doing it myself, and then two, get all the respect from the peers and people following me alongside. Don't do the second thing, just do the first thing. And then maybe down the road, in like a year or so, you can tell people, hey, look, I've done this actually for 3 months straight, and here are the actual benefits I experienced. And I've done it purely for myself. Don't even think about sharing it at all. And then you have a truthful, pure experience, and you know you did it for the right reasons, which isn't to share it or to brag with it or get some sort of respect from peers. You did it just for yourself, basically. And I think that's quite rare in today's society, because we're connecting so quickly, sort of activities that are respected in the eyes of society we're connecting that with sharing it as quickly as possible, so that we do get that double reward. But then we sort of cut away, like, we're not really doing it for the right reasons, is what I'm trying to say. And if you don't do it for the right reasons, you don't get the right benefits out of it. For example, you should read, let's say you want to get into business or into any skill set, just read a bunch of books, and like 70% of the books are kind of worthless to you, probably, and then there are some good pieces in there, and then you take those pieces and you implement them into real life, and then some stuff, you know, grows out of it, and like 2 years later you remind yourself, oh shit, like this concept actually ended up working out for myself, and this was great. And then 3 years down the road, you're in a podcast and someone asks you, like, how did you do that? And then you come to the whole conclusion of, you know, like 3 years ago I read this thing, and then I started implementing this, this, and this, and suddenly I learned this lesson, and this is what came out of it. And then the guy on the other side actually experiences a pure lesson, and not something that you're just, I mean, the word I'm trying to find is really hard to pronounce. It's called
regurgitating.
Exactly. Very tough. Regurgitating something that you actually didn't really experience and don't really know, but it sounds good on paper, essentially.
Definitely. I absolutely love that. I've actually got chilled. I've had this conversation recently because there are so many like self-help books, for example, out there, and people as society have become obsessed. It's almost a trend to share, you know, these self-help books on social media. Like look at the book that I'm reading. But the thing is like, and I'm definitely guilty of this myself, where, you know, I'll read something and then I'll preach it as if I've walked it.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's so important and so crucial to learn to get into the habit of walking the walk rather than talking the talk, because people are going to pick up on that anyway. Like people are going to see your integrity, your values, the way you live your life, the discipline, like that is going to come off authentically. The thing is, if you're just talking the talk and you're preaching stuff that you haven't actually practiced, eventually people are going to pick up on the bullshit. People are going to call you out on it. And you're going to, because you haven't actually mastered it yourself, let's use poker, for example, you know, where you're talking about a GTO output that you've heard a top pro mention. And then when it actually comes to you trying to implement it at 100 PLO, 100 NL, $100 tournament, wherever it is, you're completely clueless because you don't actually know how to implement it in the correct strategy. You've just memorized something. I think it was I think it's Charlie Munger actually that was talking about, I want to say it was one of his speeches, university graduation speeches back in the 90s, where he's like, there are so many people in school, college, and university that come out with the best grades. And he said, but a lot of these people are guaranteed to fail at life. He said, the reason they're guaranteed to fail at life is because all they've been doing throughout high school, college, and university is memorizing facts rather than actually learning things from that true core and having a deep understanding of what it is that you're learning. You're just memorizing stuff, but when it actually comes to putting it in practice, you're just like, well, actually, I don't really understand this. I don't actually understand what it is that I'm talking about. It's just something that I've read, a fact that I read somewhere. And yeah, I mean, your idea of challenging people listening to this, of just trying things for the actual benefits of what they will give you, rather than that dopamine rush of, you know, sharing it on social media. Hey guys, I'm taking cold showers for the next 30 days and whatnot. Because there are two things that can happen there. Like you said, firstly, you lose the value of actually testing that out. But then secondly, if you don't actually get the response that you want from people, and you don't get that like validation from your peers or whoever it is, that can actually like lead to, you know, self-doubt and a mini existential crisis, if you will, of like, oh, actually, is this actually worth doing? You know, not enough people gave me feedback that this is the way to go. You know, am I just wasting my time, rather than just trying to see what works for you and what values that they have for yourself. But yeah, you mentioned a couple of mental models there. I love that. I feel like we need to set the road, if you will, pave the road to introduce mental models to the poker world, because these are obviously kind of just life hacks, if you will, of thought processes that you can actually use in, you know, your day-to-day life. And I was curious to kind of pluck your brain as to mental models that you've found yourself using recently in business, that you've been trialing. And then for the poker players out there, mental models that you found helped you in your career playing poker for many years.
Totally. Let me close the door.
No worries. Got an intruder.
There we go. You know, the thing.
Go on.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, you look in great shape, mate. You've been hitting the gym hard.
Just copying Espen's workout regime, you know.
You know, when you were talking, I was like, you know, Espen's gonna love this, because you're talking about not sharing stuff on social media, and just doing the values that they have. So Espen, take note, mate.
I mean, you know, the intent is the most important part about it, I think, and it's very easy. I'm not talking about Espen, just in general, to overshadow your thinking with flawed ideas. For example, I'm sharing this because it is benefiting others, and that's a truth. It is benefiting others, but like, what harm is it doing to you by using that excuse to share things? And also, what activities are you actually doing? Because in your mind, you know that it's going to look good on social media, versus would you still do it if no one would care? And the matter of the fact is also, when you do things that will set you apart from most people in terms of success, what will happen is that you will find more distance. You create a bigger gap between anyone else, like the average person that follows you, basically, or the average person in your circle. You create more distance between yourself and others. This is actually what happens, because if you're by definition separating yourself from the 99% and you want to go to the 1%, you will create a gap. And if you actually share all these things, you will not find the you will not find the appreciation and the, what is it called, encouragement by the people around you, because they might think either you're just bragging or fooling them, or they just compare themselves to you and think, well, I don't want to be around this person because it always makes me feel bad. This guy works out more, he makes more money, works harder, has more friends, has more this, has more benefits, has more life quality, like all these things. I don't want to compare myself to this individual. And if I'm around that individual all the time and he shares all those things, I feel terrible, right? Because that's the easiest way to feel terrible, is to just compare yourself all the time with other people that are at a level up.
Of course.
And the easiest way to feel better about yourself, but it's also not good, is to compare yourself to people that are worse. You know, that's why people generally talk bad about others, because it makes them feel better about themselves. Oh, this guy, you know, like I'm in bad shape, but look at this guy. Like, I'm not consistent, but look at that guy, right? Like I have made some mistakes, but look at this guy. This guy made a huge mistake. So it's kind of like, it's difficult to identify, which sort of like ties into mental models, when something is true, but it still doesn't benefit you, or when two statements are true, but they don't really match each other very well. So for example, for mental models, the first thing I want to say about mental models is that these are sort of guidelines that I use in terms of decision making, and I'm not trying to be original at all with them. Like, I'm not claiming at all that I learned that I invented any of them, which is actually good news, because it means that you can actually just learn them. You can just read a book, which is a completely new concept, and then learn something, and then make it your own in terms of make it useful. So I think the most valuable mental models are based on the gap between, you know what you want, but you still don't get it. You know what you should do, but you still don't do it. Like, why do we know what we should do? For example, you should work out. I know I should work out if I want to get to this goal, or if I want to become this person. I'm still not doing it. Why is there a gap? And mental models basically help you to understand, first of all, understand the gap in the first place, but also can help you to push yourself in the right direction. So for example, one that I recently heard of, again, I actually heard this one from a guy that you should definitely follow out there, Alex Hormozi. You know Alex Hormozi, by the way?
I don't know.
He's probably like the most influential person for my self-improvement currently out there. And I followed a lot of different guys, learned from a lot of different individuals, either in person or just following books, YouTube, like videos to podcasts and whatever. And this exercise or mental model is called, what would Jesus do? And the idea of it is, you have so many self-beliefs about yourself, what you can and can't do, who you are and who you're not, that it's sometimes difficult to convince yourself that you're going to do it. For example, you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to work out. But then you're like, well, I'm not sure if I really am going to work out, because I feel kind of comfortable in bed right now, right? So like, I'm not that kind of person. But I will work out tomorrow, for example. So that works out if you attach your behavior to your current identity. It's very hard to reframe your identity. So like, you can wake up, for example, every day in the morning and just tell yourself, I am disciplined. But the reality is that's not going to work. Like, just because you use those affirmations, you're not actually going to change. The only thing that will change you is doing the actual thing. And then you're disciplined. Like, you're doing the thing first and then you're disciplined. You're not just disciplined. So how do you get yourself to do it? You would ask yourself, what would, for example, Espen do? Well, probably wake up and get to fucking work, work out, let's go. Or what would the best poker player in the world do right now? And if the gap is too big, then you ask yourself, what would my friend do? who is actually better at poker in this situation, what would they do? Would they quit the session? Would they wake up early? Would they study now? Or would they play video games, for example? So you basically use someone else's identity. And they used to do that back. I mean, religious people do that still when it comes to morals. What would Jesus do is the same idea. You can't convince yourself that you have the moral compass to make the right decision. So you use someone else's identity or framework and then attach yourself to it. For example, what would Jesus do here? Well, he wouldn't steal. Okay. What would the best poker player in the world do right there? He would quit the session. He would move down in stakes. He would take this shot. He would make this bluff, right? But if you're trying to convince yourself of it, it's so difficult because you know who you are and who you're not. And changing yourself or self-belief about yourself in the heat of the moment is almost impossible. So by just waking up and saying, for example, what would Goggins do? He would just wake the fuck up and go out. That's what he would do. Yeah. Okay, so if you're trying to change your identity closer to Goggins, that's what you need to do. You need to just think about multiple times a day when you are coming across those forks. Should I do X? Should I do Y? Should I go out and run or should I stay at home? What would Goggins do? What would the best poker player do? What would a billionaire do? What would a millionaire do? What would I do? Who cares? Because you're trying to change. And then you move in a better direction. That's, for example, a mental model.
But no, inversion is such a powerful tool. And I really challenge like the people at home to start off by trying to implement it on a very small scale and gradually scaling up. And one of the best ways you can do this is like, if you do have a goal in mind of, becoming an elite poker player, let's use poker as an example because, this is the Overbet podcast. So we got you on the show, but we can look at the people that have paved the road for us up until now. So let's take someone like Jason Koon, for example, right? It's pretty fair to say that you can make some certain assumptions about Jason Koon's discipline, Jason Koon's relationship with himself, his relationship with studying, and his relationship with playing. And rather than thinking about all of the things that you're going to have to be in order to get to his level, you can think about all of the things that he does and start implementing them one at a time. So the difference, obviously, being like you said, the gap can sometimes be too big. It can be very overwhelming if you're like, okay, well, now I need to be in the lab for 6 hours a day. I need to go running for an hour. I need to be working out for an hour. All of these things, like it's going to be very overwhelming for someone that's just starting out. But if you use inversion in that way, and you look around at your peers, some of the top pros, or like you said, people that are better than you, it will eventually come very naturally to you to just start implementing these things. It will become part of the routine. And as you said, it will become part of your identity. And you touched on something that I really want to kind of take a deeper dive into, because it's something that I've struggled with personally. And it's something that I know that human beings in general struggle with, is having that relationship with yourself where when you do wake up and you're like, okay, I'm up early, I'm going to go to the gym today. But then as you start to wake up, you realize that actually I'm pretty comfortable right here. I can scroll Instagram, go on Twitter, can, order some food. How have you and you and some of the people that I've met through you seem to have this really great relationship with themselves on a very deep and internal level, where when you say something that you're going to follow through on it? And the reason I bring this up is because I have struggled personally with quitting cigarettes over the years. I have struggled personally with going to the gym. But the thing is, if you ask me about smoking or the gym, like I can list all the benefits for going to the gym. I know all the downsides for smoking. I know why I shouldn't smoke. I know why I should go to the gym. And I'll tell myself these things. But then I have struggled historically with that relationship of sticking to my word and the way that I talk with myself. And also, just to go a little bit further than that, it also impacts your relationships and friendships and the way you communicate with other people. Because if you aren't honest with yourself, if you can't be honest with yourself, then a lot of the stuff that you say and do with other people can come across as disingenuous, because you say, oh yeah, I'm going to meet you at 6 p.m. or let's do this next weekend. But then Wednesday rolls around and you're like, oh, I'm not feeling up for, whatever it is that you arranged to do. And you get into that habit of not sticking to your word, firstly, when it comes to your own internal beliefs and your own internal system, but you start letting other people down, and people start picking up on that. And, you know, it gets to the point where if the people that you're letting down actually value themselves and whatnot, they'll turn around and say, hey man, no disrespect, but like, you know, you kind of keep letting me down here. I'm not really interested in associating myself with you. So I'm really curious to kind of hear how, firstly, how you came to that realization that your word is your bond, and why that is such an important value to have, and why that is, you know, such an important part of your identity as well, if that makes sense.
I mean, the most important relationship you have is with yourself. Like, if you can't believe your own word, you're in a terrible spot, basically. And to a certain degree, we all break our own word to ourselves sometimes, or many times. But it's not about doing it or not. It's not like black or white. It's more like a voting system, or to which degree, essentially. But the way I would look at it is, the best relationship you can have to yourself is, imagine you're two people, or two person. Is that the right way? Two people. Imagine you're two people, and one of them is the boss. He makes the plans. He creates the goals, and he tells the other person, look, can we agree on this goal or this goal and that goal? And then the receiver, has to be really honest with themselves and say, okay, look, can I do this actually? Because I know this guy's demanding, and he is demanding because he has the big vision. He wants the future, but you're the now. So you have to first understand there is this other voice in your head who demands a lot. And there's this current you that has certain limitations because of where you are right now. But obviously you want to grow out of that, and your boss, quote unquote, wants to see you grow as well. So you have to find a compromise in the middle and say, okay, look, I want you to work out 6 days a week. And then the guy is like, yeah, that sounds great, boss. But the thing is, like, I'm not going to be able to do that. Okay, let's do it 4 times. And say, well, that's going to be really hard, but okay, I'll do it. Now, imagine your basically employee is so unreliable that he sometimes does it and sometimes doesn't. Like, that's a really toxic relationship. And the mistake happens on both ends. One guy was demanding too much. The other guy was taking on too much. So it's like, there's sort of a mistake on both ends, essentially. That happens. And that happens internally within you, where you're expecting potentially too much, or the guy is sort of too weak to stick to his word. And I would say, if you can work on both ends. Like, if you work on the boss side of things, you work on understanding capabilities, limitations, understanding time frame, implementability. Yeah. Implementation, accountability, right? Like, that's your role, understanding that, following up on it. The other guy's role is to, well, be honest with themselves, like where they are at and what they're willing to sacrifice to change. And also, I think the most important internal conversation that the other guy needs to have, the guy that needs to put it in action, the operator, you can say, is he needs to understand that certain things are not going to be fun. And in the heat of the moment, he will realize that this is not fun, but I'm still going to do it. And the expectation cannot be, I'm only going to do it if it's fun or pleasurable or okay. Like, in that moment, that individual has to realize the goal here is not to have fun. It has to be painful. It will be painful. Maybe not forever, but even though it is painful, or I don't like it, or I don't see the big vision, or I don't want to do it, I'm still going to do it. And that's the relationship you want to have with a business partner or an employee. You know, that guy, or even a friend, that guy, even if things get hard, he will stick to his word and do it. That's the friend you want to have. And that's the internal relationship you want to have as well. That, you know, when things get difficult, the guy will stick to his word. And and if you don't have that within you, then you have a real big internal conflict, because the one guy who didn't put it in action is going to blame it on the boss. Well, you expected too much. This was just a grandiose vision that I have to put in action, but I have to do all the work. And the other guy's like, dude, like, we're trying to go to the mountain. Like, we're trying to reach top level. What are you doing? You're holding us back, right? So I think becoming very clairvoyant of how that conversation goes, and also understanding speed is very important. Like the top guy always wants it faster, and the lower guy always wants to get the right incentives. Well, give me more time, give me more rewards. You want me to work harder? Pay me more tomorrow. Well, and the boss is like, well, I can't because the rewards will come in much later. Can we find a compromise? Well, okay, I'll go 4 times a week to the gym, but I'll go to the restaurant on Fridays. All right, that's a good deal. And then when the guy is waking up on Monday morning and thinking, I don't want to go to the gym, he will think back and say, well, if I break my word here, we're going to get into a real big problem internally with my boss. And also, I'm not going to get the reward on Friday. I agree to this, and I don't expect this to be fun, or even, I don't even need to see the bigger picture. I'm just going to do it. No matter, you need no reason. You just do it. That's where you need to be in the state of the moment, essentially, and convince yourself off.
I love that. I love that. That's like sitting with discomfort, basically, in order to grow as a person. And I think the quicker you can build that relationship with yourself, where whenever a uncomfortable situation or task does arise, you're not running away from it. You're actually, just fully embracing it and just dealing with it. A really good way, and this isn't me preaching like a gospel, but a good way for this is ice baths, at least for me, because I hated it at first, just being, freezing cold and uncomfortable and wanting to get out. But it's just like discomfort and everything in life, all feelings are impermanent. Like there aren't any that, are permanent. The discomfort is temporary. And if you can build that relationship with yourself where you are aware of that and you can push through when you need to, you are going to be able to take on, so many more challenges as you grow as a person and in life. I think one of the things you mentioned there is so important for poker, where you do have the kind of boss and employee conversation in your head where, let's say, you're semi-pro, you're not quite at the professional level yet. And you need X amount of money per month to pay bills, rent, car, phone, whatever it is. And all you want to do is grind. Like you just grinding, you're waking up and you're grinding 10 hours a day. And more often than not, unless you have a natural talent for the game, and even that is normally capped without studying, you're not going to actually see as much growth as a player as you would if you spent 2 hours a day studying and improving and working on leaks and reviewing hand histories and talking with people that are better than you. And this is like, it sounds so obvious when you actually think about it and you put it out there to the world, but the amount of people, it's funny when like, I haven't played on Stars for a year, for example, and I scroll through the lobbies and I see people that I tagged from 2-3 years ago playing the same stakes. And it's just like, okay, well, why is that? Like, why are you still playing the same stakes after 3 years? You would think that you would have at least moved up a couple of levels. Well, it's because as soon as you wake up, you're making the same mistake as yesterday and expecting a different outcome. Like, that's just not possible. That's like, saying, oh, I want to become a top crusher, being in a car on a highway, and after 20 minutes complaining, oh, why are we not there yet? Like, well, of course you're not there yet. if you, just like doing you just have to really get into that. I want to say it kind of falls under second order thinking, which is like another mental model, right? Where you don't think about the short-term gratification or rewards that you're going to get from something. So say you're playing 100 PLO, you sit down, play a session for 8 hours, and your short-term rewards may be that you win 5 buy-ins, you win $500 on the day. But if you think long-term, a year down the line, if you're investing 2 hours each day into studying and improving, do you think that you're still going to be stuck playing 100 PLO? Or do you think your actual win rate and income is going to be massively higher than that short-term $500? Of course, it's going to be the latter, right? And it's definitely something that I've been guilty of. It's definitely something I see in a lot of poker players as well. And I do implore people to try and be more realistic with themselves, that like, okay, is me grinding 10,000 hands today going to benefit me in 2 years from now? Or is that 1 hour, that 2 hour of studying, or being in a Discord group, chatting with people, actually going to be the thing that really like benefits me long term? So
yeah, I guess a lot of those individuals and most people who make money on a consistent basis playing poker, like they're just on, like they're in it for the wrong reasons, and they're still able to wing it because poker does allow very mediocre effort and still have the luxury of supporting your lifestyle, essentially. And I'm saying supporting your lifestyle in the sense of not growing, not building wealth or any system that is going to consistently make your life easier. It just allows for not having a boss, essentially. And that, in a sense of being, again, quite average in all areas. Poker is really, it's very tricky because, you know, it always reminds me of, like, our company, for example, is built based on, like, most of the individuals in there have been poker players in the past for like 5 to 10 years. And then they switched to business. And when you hear poker players talk about a transitioning phase ever in their life, there was, you know, they say stuff like, well, a poker player can do anything, you know, and like they can migrate to any other business and just be successful because they have been a poker player, you know. And the thing is, like, the person who made up this idea was a poker player, and it is it is bullshit. All right. And also, maybe there was a guy on Wall Street who said it, and he worked with the top-notch genius in poker who transitioned into trading, who, yes, was able to make the transition because he was overqualified in poker anyway. He was a genius, and he just transitioned seamlessly because he has such a high IQ and such a high skill set with numbers, for example, that he was able to do that. But most poker players are basically, you know, like average. They put an average, mediocre effort into their career, like most people in other careers, and they will struggle a lot to transition. Think about it this way. How many poker players, let's say you start a company, which is what I did, and you hire a bunch of poker players. Like, how many of those individuals are accountable, wake up at 8 a.m. in the morning, show up with results, put in consistent efforts, show up on meetings at the right time, know what it is like to not win suddenly $5,000 a day, but actually work for an hourly. Like, most poker players are not used to that at all. Like, they're expecting sick things out there, you know, like they're not able to take on a normal job because they don't have the skill set. And the issue, I think, is, first of all, in poker, you're still able to wing it by having those shortcomings in your habits, I would say.
Yeah.
But also, you're not really being forced by others. Like, you don't really have a feedback loop that makes you realize that you suck. On the one end, yes, you are making $5,000 a month playing low mid stakes poker, and that's your only feedback loop you have, which is mainly based on the industry and how many recreational players are in there. But let's imagine you're in business, like you have competitors, or you get into a boardroom, a meeting with other individuals, and they come up with actual skills. I read this book. We're going to do this. Here are the way we need to do the numbers. Here's the business concept. Here is like a marketing idea. How are we going to build the product? How are we going to get traffic onto our website? How are we going to build the website? What about the software product, right? You see all these people with all these skill sets, and they're on point, and they're sharp, and they're ready, they're dressed. They know what they want out of life. They have everything intact, essentially. And you come in, and if you're a bum and you're just like, you're going to be out of that meeting soon. And you're going to be out of the company soon as well, because you're not on that level. In poker, though, because there is no accountability, apart from you making enough money to get by, it is very comforting for a lot of people to just stick to the same level for a couple more years with a slightly declining hourly, and still sort of make it before it's all going to explode into, I don't know what to do with my life. I'm like 40 years old and the games got tougher. It's all because of the bots and GTO. Obviously, no self-accountability at all. And now, what am I going to do? You know, so I think that reality will sink in pretty soon with people like myself in similar age classes, where you played poker for 10 years plus, you get to your, close to 40s, and you realize that maybe I want more money, other stimulus, or other opportunities. What am I going to do now that I like most poker players? And again, I'm not talking about Isaac fucking Haxton or Jason Kuhn. I talk about an average low stakes grinder who makes a living in whatever country. Like, they can't get fucking up at 8 a.m. in the morning. They can't pick up a book and say, read this, learn this, go through 6 months of non-paid, I don't know, being an intern, and then start earning 3,000 a month and build up this thing. Like, that's really hard. That's very hard if all you used to do in the last 10 or 5 years has been to wake up, grind in your pajamas, and then do that, you know, because that's the reality of like, and when they study for like 4 hours a week, they feel like really hard workers, you know, hashtag hustle, hashtag PO solver, hashtag Odin, whatever it is. I am a sig, you know, I've grinded some sig sims. I'm tough, man. It's not like you're not, it's just, you're not really working that hard, you know?
Hashtag prime mind ready for the next session. Yeah. You touched on some great things there that I want to kind of bounce back to. The first one was feedback loops, and just how pivotal that is to have in place to be successful in anything, not just in poker, but as a person, surrounding yourself with friends that aren't afraid to call you out on your bullshit, to tell you where you can improve. For example, like me, Philip, and Espen have this thing now. It was thanks to Patrick Leonard who shared it on his story, which was asking those closest to you what you can improve on and not being offended by what they have to say. And we like have like a group chat, and Espen was like, hey, this actually seems like a really good idea. Let's do it. So like, we just like all wrote out a long wall of text on, you know, how we can improve. And the thing is like, when you are hanging out with people, you're closer to people, it's very uncomfortable to kind of almost give unsolicited advice, if you will, on, because we can always see the issues in other people, right? Like how our friends can improve, how our family members can improve, how our peers as poker players can improve. Like, we're very quick to judge, but then when it comes to ourselves, you know, we give ourselves a lot of leeway. And building that dynamic between those closest to you and having that feedback loop where, firstly, you don't get defensive when you receive this constructive criticism. Secondly, you don't feel the need to attack back and then, you know, make judgments or critiques on theirs, but just viewing it as something that's really healthy so that you can then make a conscious effort to improve as a person. So having that feedback loop, how did you kind of go about that with setting up your business? Because that's not something that you just wake up and know what to look for in people. So I'm very curious that the company that you've set up and the people that you have in place, as I know that at least 3 of them have been there with you since I first met you, which I want to say was in 2019. So we're going on 3-4 years now. And it was very evident to me from the beginning when I met you that you all just have the utmost respect for each other and you really look out for each other. But like what I was trying to say is that like you can't just wake up one morning and know what to look for. So how did you go about building that team around you where you could trust your co-founders or whatever their roles are to follow through on their word when it came to a business decision? Or, you know, when you go to bed at night, you're not worried about the 1,000,001 things that the company's going to do. You know that Luke's going to take care of it, or Oresto's going to take care of it. Like, having that trust to know that, right, Luke said he's going to take care of it, I trust him, he's going to take care of it. Because it's something that we've really struggled with at Overbet Express so far. Like, it's one of the challenges that we've faced. So yeah, more from like a selfish point of view, if you will. I'm very curious to hear how you went about that.
Well, the first thing I would say is that it's very difficult to build a successful company with friends, because you hire for friendship and not for skill set. And I did kind of the same thing, but I was lucky with the individuals I met in like the first key people in the company. Like, we grew basically from, I would say, 4 people to about 20 people today. And the first individuals are really key players, obviously. But I would say the way trust comes together is, first of all, I wouldn't expect trust. Like, like when I hire someone, I trust them, but I don't expect them to hold on to it. Like I expect them to potentially disappoint me or not. And when they do disappoint me, I usually think of it as they were trying to do it, but they couldn't for some reason. Maybe they didn't have the skill set, or they felt uncomfortable, or even if someone just slacks off and doesn't deliver, I don't think they did it because they're a terrible individual. I think they just aren't in the position to actually follow through with what they said. They're not yet at that place. And then I have to decide for myself, do I want to be basically the leader who is developing that individual to the right place? And when it comes to coaching other people, right, because that sort of ties into the first question you had there. So my closest friends outside the company, like what we did many times for the last couple of years, we basically got coaching in coaching. So we basically would meet up with, this is all non-poker related, obviously, but we would meet up with a coach who's coaching other people how to coach better. If that makes sense. And I also got coached throughout the last 10 years by many different individuals, from mindset to business to fitness, whatever area basically. And the best coaches I have found are always people that have good questions. It's not people that have good advice. Good questions are highly underrated. And that's also what I learned in coaching for coaching. It is the best coaches ask the best questions, because the best questions bring out the best ideas of that individual that are already there. And you're basically trying to just support the other individual to bring it out. So basically all I'm doing in my company or with my friends is I wouldn't tell anyone like, you suck at this, but I would be interested and invested in making them better when they want it. So I would ask them like, well, how do you feel? And they might say like, I don't really know, like I'm not really accomplishing my goals. And I say, well, why do you care? What are those goals? And then we say, well, this is my goal. Okay, why is this important to you? And then you just keep asking questions to figure out where is the imbalance between this is what I want and this is what I'm doing or what I'm getting. And you don't even have to point out, I think, like this sentence shouldn't even come out of your mouth, not you specifically, just in general. It's like, I think you should do this, trying to not even say that. And it's very hard to do that. It's very hard. Like you're in a conversation, someone says something to you, you know the answer, you slide in. I know the answer. This is what you should do. I read a book, I heard advice, right? Yeah. If you're actually trying to support the other individuals, you're trying to help them grow, you lean back. And the biggest, the most peaceful, useful advice that I received there was, don't feel the responsibility to solve the problem for the other person. That's not your job. They need to solve the problem. You sit back. And when you have an idea, don't feel like, oh, wait, I can solve the problem. Let me chime in. No, you sit back and you say, I'm listening, I'm invested, but you're solving the problem. And I'm trying to help you to solve the problem. I'm not solving the problem. And when you do that, what you will discover is that people would appreciate your advice a lot more, because you're never changing their opinion, which is very hard to do anyway. All you're doing is you're making them help to think clearer. They say something and you say like, well, this kind of sounds different than what you said before. How do those things connect? And then they're like, wait a moment, you're actually right. I think what I actually mean is this. And then you're like, oh, that's interesting. Fantastic. Right? And then they are like, oh, cool, now I understand more. And then they go out of the conversation thinking, this dude helped me so much, but you actually didn't give any advice. You were just helping. And with this is a skill set, right, to build up on. And this is basically the way that's basically one of my key roles in the company, is to understand other people and help them to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And when you help them to do that, either as an individual or within the company, right? People have like different desires. I want to learn this. I want to do this. I want to be responsible for that. I want to work from Monday to Friday. I want to work every day. I want to work at nights. They have different desires and ideas and so on, right? And you're trying to listen to that and figure out how can you help that individual so that they can help you back. And when you do that, and when they know that you have their best intent at heart, then they are willing to work long or work hard or be trustworthy, because they know you actually care about them and providing them with a long-term perspective for finding growth within the company and as individuals. And then there's no reason and that's also something I believe very strongly in, is you need to create incentives for people to not be untrustworthy. So like if you create the incentive of, hey, look, you have such a nurturing ground over here. We're all trying to help you and we're all friends and we all respect each other. Then there's no reason, like even if you fuck up and you tell us, we understand and we help and we continue to help and support and help you to grow and we listen. Why? There would be no reason to be lying. Like what's the reason for lying? Like we're not gonna fire, we don't even fire you, which is understand and then accept, right? And then and that's also the kind of friend you want to have. Like you don't want to hide something from your friend. You want to know that even if you did something terrible, your friend will understand and in some way support you and not just tell you to fuck off, essentially. And that's the culture that you're trying to build, not only in a company, but in any relationship you have, where the other guy knows they can tell you the truth at all times and it will be okay. Like we will find the way, we will make it work, even if it's something terrible. That's the relationship you want to have, basically.
How do you rephrase that question? I think you should. Like, how do you personally rephrase it? Like, if giving some examples.
You don't.
So we could...
There you go. That's a good question. You don't. So here's what you do: you sit back, right? Someone tells you their problem, right?
Okay.
First thing you want to do is,
I'm having trouble at work, for example. So then my response would be, well, let me ask you this: do you want me to just listen to what you have to say so that you can leave it somewhere, your frustration, for example, or do you want actual advice? Right? What's the mission here? What do you want exactly, right? And then they will realize that actually you're first of all listening and you also care about trying to meet the desire. And sometimes they might say, well, I just want to like, usually they just want to say something. And the thing is, if they actually don't want the advice, it's very important to respect that and say like, okay. And then you can still say, listen, if you don't actually want advice, you just want to like leave all your baggage here, like, I don't really feel in the mood, or like, I don't really want to be that guy for you consistently. Yeah,
just like
respectfully,
exactly. And say, for example, let's say you have a girlfriend who's always complaining. We say, and this happens quite frequently, like you have a partner complains a lot, right? But then when you give advice, they don't really implement it, or actually they didn't ask for advice, right? So now you have a decision to make as a coach or a good friend. You first have to identify what's the objective here. Are you trying to tell me something you're bothered by, but you don't want advice? Or are you actually seeking advice? And then they have the problem now, right? Because what you did is you gave them the responsibility to decide, what do you want? Make a decision. And then they say, well, actually, I just want to tell you something. And they're like, okay, look, I'm going to listen to it. But if it gets all too negative and so on, you know, I already told you what I think about it. And as long as you are not willing to change it, I don't want to hear about it. Or you can also say it in like a more respectful or caring way. You have to figure out the language, right? But essentially, you're not there to fix the problem. Or they say, I actually want advice. Cool. They come to you to say, this is my problem. And then the idea comes to your mind. The first thing you should do when this happens is to sit back even more and say like, I had an idea. And then you sit back and here's what you say. So what? Or what now? That's all you do. That's all you do. Even if you're super triggered and they're like, well, you tell me. And then you say, well, why don't you tell me? What do you think you should do? And then like, I don't know. Well, let's think about it. And then what you could do is you can propose them some idea paths. Well, how do you usually solve a problem like this? Or do you have a role model and can think of how they would solve the problem, right? All you're trying to do is you're trying to basically not solve the problem. And I'm not saying this in like a deceptive, I'm not trying to solve the problem, but what you're actually doing, you're helping the other person to find a way to solve these problems for themselves. That's which is way more helpful than actually just telling them, I know exactly what you should do. Shut up and do this. Because they will never do that anyway. And also they will come back to you for a second piece of advice like a day after.
Yeah. I'm having so many flashbacks, man. Holy shit. I'm like, the amount of times where like I've just given advice and then they're like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And it's just like, you know, really frustrating and telling it's just like, then why are you coming to me? Like I'm giving you advice and like, you're just deflecting everything that I'm suggesting. Like, And then it escalates and you get frustrated. You like, go fucking figure it out yourself then. And it just all blows up. It can get really messy.
It's also called, like, there's an image for that, which is called, like, they're trying to like, I learned this in German, so it's a little bit more difficult to translate sometimes, but it's called, they're trying to put a backpack on you. You know, they come up to you and say like, hey, look at this massive backpack. Take this on, solve my problem. And then you're like, oh, well, now that I have it on, okay, here you should do this. And it's like zero appreciation and implementation, but you're the monkey. Like what all they're doing is like, dance, monkey, dance, put on the back, tell me all your tricks. I'm going to do nothing. And we're in conflict. But instead you should say like, wait a moment, why do I have the back? Let's just carefully put back on you. Like, let me carefully put it back on your back, the backpack, and tell me what's in there. How do you want to solve the problem, right? Then you can actually use this also in different situations. For example, let's say you are at a hotel and the guy comes up to you and you're like, well, is my cab here? And he says, well, I don't know where it is. Like, I ordered it. It's not here. Okay, so now you can say, for example, well, how do we want to solve the problem, right? Because it's a slight variation of it, but basically what you do is, instead of saying, how do you want to solve the problem? You say, how are we going to solve the problem, right? Actually, what you're saying is how you're going to solve the problem. But basically, if you would put the backpack on him aggressively, they would think, wait, why am I the dancing monkey right here?
Gonna get defensive, yeah.
Exactly. And so you should always ask yourself, who's trying to solve the problem here? Exactly. And that's the thing. When someone comes up to you, wants to talk, it's unclear what they actually expect from you. Even they don't know it. Maybe they know it subconsciously, and you receive a wrong message. Oh, they want to get advice. They want to solve a problem. They want to do this, but actually they want to do something different. So it's your responsibility as a good listener and coach to clear up, first of all, on what do you expect from this conversation, right? And then they might say this, and this, and it's like, well, listen, I have like 10 minutes. I'm happy to try to help you there. Let's get into it.
Absolutely brilliant, mate. Fantastic. It really is. I'm already just thinking, like I said, having like a million conversations. And the thing is like, even just the way you just worded it now, without actually implementing it as a real example, you can just, at least for me, already I felt like my defenses were lowered. I didn't feel attacked. Like you're not going to feel attacked when you word things that way, where you're careful with the language that you choose when someone is clearly in a vulnerable state, you know, if they want to like vent to you and whatnot, because when you are being vulnerable and in that position, you know, a lot of people can get emotionally reactive very quickly. So that makes so much sense, especially at the hotel example. It's like, well, how are we going to solve this? That's fantastic. But I wanted to talk about the business. So for people at home who don't know the business, and I guess a bit late for an introduction, but I've got to do a separate intro, as I told you. But the business behind that was built off of your poker career, if you will. The company is the PLO Mastermind. You offer an array of software training, GTO solves. You have different coaches in place with different skill sets, different levels. And I wanted to dive in briefly into a few topics around the business. So firstly, being in the public eye and how that has kind of basically what you've learned from it, because we already spoke earlier on in regards to anonymity being a privilege. And when you label when you connect your own personal brand to a company's brand, and you're using your face to promote a company, you open yourself up to a lot of scrutiny, a lot of backlash. A lot of people make judgments about the company product, what the company has to offer, based off of your poker capabilities or one-hand history they saw where you lost 10K, you know, and they make a judgment. Oh, well, you know, he lost the 10K in that hand. Surely his product's not any good. Yeah, so basically that opening yourself up to being attacked almost, if you will, in the public eye and in the public space by people that really don't know you. They only know you on a surface level. They only know you through a couple of hands that they've seen or a few streams that you've done, or unfortunately, through the words of other content creators, if you will, as has been known in the poker world, there are certain content creators that have built careers off of ripping down other people. We don't need to name any names. We all know, but yeah, so having people watch your every move, having people make judgments about your business, your poker, your character, without knowing you as a business. What have you learned through that entire process? And I guess the real question is, would you recommend it? Because we're kind of doing that now ourselves by kind of tying ourselves to the brand, if you will.
Well, it's definitely a growing experience in many regards, obviously, because who you are presenting yourself as in the public eye is very much a surface level identity. And you as the creator, you might create 1,000 pieces of content, but the reality is a lot of people watch 10. And that's the version they get. And it's completely random which version. They might watch one video and think you're that guy. And another guy watches a completely different video, but your lens is more like, I've created all this content. Everyone knows exactly all the pieces I've done, all the things I've said, right? But that's not how it works. People have like a very surface level understanding of who you are. And that's very important to understand. So on the one end, like when I had like a couple of years ago, I had like so much backlash in the public eye. And what I realized there is, or learned years after basically, was that true confidence is knowing who you are, even when people don't like you or dislike you, like knowing what's true and what's not true about you, and caring about that a lot more than anything else. Because if your intent is right, if you're sure of yourself and you know you're a good person, you're doing the right things, that's the most important thing. And a lot of I'd say toxic people on social media, their main goal, even if they don't know it potentially, is to shake that confidence up. That's what they want. They want to shake up your confidence and make you believe you're not a good person or you're not successful. You don't have the authority to be here or there. They're trying to shake you up essentially. And that's usually the minority of people, because the majority of people, they are not active. They're not vocal on social media. They consume content essentially. And a lot of those individuals are actually supportive of your content. They like your content. They feel like you help them as well. So it's very important that you put your intent above these guys who are trying to shake you up essentially. And if you know for yourself, look, I'm out here because I'm actually trying to help these individuals, and I think that I'm good at it, and I want to continue to do that, and I think I do make a difference, and that this actually gives me some purpose. That's all that matters essentially. And then an individual will see one hand and one piece of content, and you have to understand that what that person says or thinks about you has some relevancy, not about who you are, but about how people perceive you based on this piece of content. And you can learn from that and say, okay, look, if I make this statement or put out this piece of content, people will say this, people will think this. Am I okay with that or not? And you will learn after a while to either be okay with that or not. For example, sometimes one of my editors puts together a piece of content where I'm very lucky in a hand, right? And I'm thinking of like, should I post this on social media or not, right? And I know the response will be terrible move. What else could it be? Like, you're
Sun
always
runner.
lucky. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
this guy has
lucky.
nothing. 100% will be that, right?
Yeah.
So if I already know that now after years of experience and I'm still posting it, but then feel upset about the response, then I just don't understand the game. And if I am shaken up by the response in understanding who I am myself, then I am not enough confident to actually be in that space essentially. And of course you will grow into it. You will make pieces of content and statements and moves that you're not prepared for. Like, things will happen, shake you up. There's pressure. The thing that social media does the most is also one of my key learnings is a lot of the times they don't lie. Like, people don't necessarily say something that is untrue about you. For example, terrible move. Yeah, maybe this was a terrible move, but what they will do is they amplify a specific trait or action or thing you said by 100 times. Yeah. So they say, for example, you said this one statement, and because of that, you are exactly this person, and every move you make, every intent, right, is based on this one statement. So they amplify, they choose what to amplify and what not to amplify based on their liking, based on their agenda, based on whatever bias they have about you or who you are, who you aren't. And then they just go with it. And it's on you to then either engage or disengage with that, or at least be aware that this can and probably will happen, and what that means for you as an individual. So what I started personally doing is I started posting less about me as an individual and more about what can I do for other people or my business that is not in a direct reflection of like, you know, like my not, I wouldn't say like my true inner self, but I'm more thinking of either I'm doing a service to the business or to the individual, and less I'm doing a service to myself in the sense I'm trying to portray myself this or that way. Like I'm not posting a picture with a car and I'm like chilling out in Las Vegas or whatever, right? Like I'm not
Lambo.
Yeah, exactly. because there's no benefit for anyone to do that. And most importantly, I don't need this essentially. I don't need this to be certain of who I am. And also it doesn't even help me to be like, it shakes me up myself, because when I do that and then someone says you are a superficial bragging whatever, then there's some truth in this statement, right? So why would you post this if you're not bragging and self-centered and whatever? And even though I did like 100 other things that weren't self-centered and bragging, this one thing can shake me up, and I'm self-aware, or I'm trying to be self-aware enough to then not post it and say, look, even though I made 99 pieces that were different, I'm still not going to post this piece, because I don't want to be, I don't want to be perceived or judged based on this one piece of content. Again, most people don't understand that if you post 100 pieces, most people see 2 pieces and they will judge all of it based on that. They don't follow every piece of content you do. So you have to be okay with every piece of content you do, because they might judge you completely on this one piece of content.
But wouldn't that in turn be superficial to not post that piece of content? Because out of not fear, but, you know, out of caution of receiving that backlash. Like, so for example, you know, the whole way this podcast came together is I really want to change the narrative of what it is to be a poker player and how the poker community is viewed. So I want to change that from degenerate gambler to people that inspire, hence me starting the podcast and having these discussions. So sure, you know, I could release 50 episodes like this, and you know, people are going to see these episodes and hopefully find value in the conversations that I'm having. But then if I post a story of, you know, a villa that we rented for a grindhouse for 2 months in Bali, if I don't post that out of fear that people are going to change their perception of what, oh, hang on, Henry was talking about, you know, changing the narrative of how poker players are viewed. He's having all of these in-depth discussions, but then on Instagram, he's posting this story of a villa or whatnot of some like exotic location. That would kind of be almost being not true to like myself, if you will, because that would only be showing the good stuff where I'm only going to get positive feedback, or the majority of the feedback that I'm going to get is like, thank you for the podcast, whatever, blah, blah, amazing, found a lot of value in this. Instead of, you know, getting the feedback of, oh, you're just showing off, like you're, you know, showcasing a lifestyle and that, like that would, I would feel like I'm being almost disingenuous, if you will, to me as a person by deliberately not showing something.
By not showing it. So do you think someone like Gary Vee is feeling disingenuous by not sharing like almost anything out of his private life?
No.
Well, why?
But at the same time, I think he's very clever with what he releases. Like it's premeditated, if you will. It's like very strategical, the way he presents himself and carries himself in public. And I think to a certain degree, that is superficial. I for the most part, a lot of the podcasts that I do, a lot of the conversations I've had, whether through commentary or through the show, is to just try and be as vulnerable as possible. Like, for example, I lost like 80% of my bankroll back in September, and I've spoken very openly about that on stream, currently in like the rebuilding phase. And a lot of people have showed up to the stream and they're like, holy shit, thank you so much for sharing that. Like, we're not the only people. A lot of people, like streamers out there, won't share, you know, how they're actually performing or their true win rates, and that out of fear of, you know, being scrutinized by the public view and whatnot. And I just feel like, but being vulnerable, being honest, showcasing everything that you go through, which is what we're trying to do here, is like the ups and downs of absolutely everything, is going to just provide that more authentic and raw insight to the lives that we're living. For example, you know, like Espen's main event run, his emotions leading up to it, the actual final table itself, the amount of action that he had in that main event, rather than, you know, going around and say, oh, hey guys, I cashed for 605K, look at me, I'm rich. It's like, actually, I only had X amount in this tournament, you know, this, that, and the other, just being like very, you know, do you know what I mean? Like just trying to present ourselves in a way where we're not just showing the good stuff. We really want to show the ups and downs of everything that we're doing. Like Ben, for example, great example, one of the most talented poker minds that I have ever personally met. Like the way Ben speaks about poker is just so fluent, and it just comes very naturally to him. But then trying to force him to step outside of his own comfort zone and be more open about, you know, the stakes that he's playing on stream, the action that he has of himself, the amount he's had in certain spots, this, that, and the other, rather than just pretending to be, you know, the Phil Ivies of the world, just trying to give people that more vulnerable, authentic experience.
Yeah, so I think if it is in service of your audience and of the mission you have, you want to have that full transparency. Well, let's say, for example, let's say you have a girlfriend and you're laughing. Well, let's say as it's a hypothetical example, okay? A hypothetical example. Someone of the Obex crew has a girlfriend.
Okay.
The girlfriend, and like they get into a big fight and then they break up, right? So I don't think this needs to be shared at all to your audience. And it doesn't make you inauthentic to not do it, but it's just not in service of the objective you actually have. And that's why you don't share it, right? Yeah. So for Gary V, his mission is not to, I don't know, focus on family relationships in general. Like there's a different mission, and he's in service to the people of being transparent and being as helpful as possible. And that's why people don't care. And I think for you guys, it's the same thing. Is if you define why and what you're actually trying to achieve, and then you share that through an authentic lens, that is amazing. Doesn't make you responsible though to share everything in your life. And I would actually say that it even, to a certain degree, waters down the message you guys have if you were to include everything of your life, right? Because the viewers, they usually show up for a reason, and they want to connect Obex with this, with like, I'm here because I want to, I don't know, let's say see poker through a more authentic, or poker players through a more authentic eye, or I want to learn from poker players about how to improve at my craft, whatever it could be. If you use other subjects frequently as well, then it's in some ways kind of a disservice, not only to the individual watching, because you're not really delivering what they were expecting, but also you are making your content less specific, which I think is, generally speaking, for like it's usually a detriment to the business output that you have. Like if I would, for example, choose to create, let's say there is a poker player out there and he's like, I've been playing poker for 10 years. I'm a no limit hold'em cash player, and I would like to create a product. I want to help other poker players. I would not recommend that individual to say, I'm going to offer coaching. I am now coaching. I'm coaching mid stakes cash. Like that is something that is very unspecific, and also it doesn't really speak to an audience very well, because a lot of people are sort of feel sort of addressed, but not specific enough to the point where the appeal is very high. what I would do is more like niche down and say, for example, I'm going to help people that have a full-time job to transition within 6 months to become a low or mid stakes cash game regular. And I'm going to support them with this and this system that I came up with and help this transitioning phase that in that way. That's all I do. All my content is focused on, you have a full-time job, you have a 3-hour window. I'm going to learn everything about how to optimize the 3-hour window. I'm going to learn everything about how to optimize a relationship while trying to make the transition. I'm going to learn everything about how much money you need to exit the full-time job, going into a poker career. I'm going to learn everything about the optimal place you want to live at if you want to do exactly this thing. So I think if you niche down overall, you are making your content more valuable because you're becoming an expert in a smaller field, and you're also making it more appealing because the audience will feel like, the audience that does feel like this is their content feels more attachment to it because it is about them. And I think that makes it overall easier.
Definitely. Yeah. Instead of, chasing 10 rabbits and ending up with none, rather just like focusing more on, like you said, like a niche market, if you will, that the viewers and the consumers of the content can relate to and want to continue coming back to, which is something we're definitely doing. Like we've been experimenting with different formats, with what works. Like I'm very bullish on the podcast, just because I feel like for me personally, over the last 10 years, I have gotten to where I am today because of the conversations that I've had with people like you over the years. I've learned a lot from, I don't necessarily want to use a term like mentors, but they are kind of, like mentor figures, if you will, where I've had conversations with people that have got 10 years more experience than me and can give me, really solid advice on areas in life to improve on and whatnot. And that was basically the whole purpose of setting this up. Is like, okay, how about I try and take those private conversations that I've had with you, Matt Berkey, Phil Galfond up until now, and share them with the world. And there are going to be, podcasts that aren't as thorough as like our conversation, for example. There are going to be podcasts that are just more for like the entertainment value side. There are going to be guests that come on and, we just shoot the shit for an hour or two and don't get as deep or as challenging, if you will. But yeah, that was like the main focus for that. And we do have like a lot of other stuff coming up as well, which I'm pretty excited for. I wanted to kind of segue into what your day-to-day life looks like now. Like you mentioned that you're not playing as much poker anymore. You're more focused on the business. But obviously coming from a poker background, that day-to-day life as a poker player, I can only assume looks very different to what JNandez's routine looks like today. And how are you keeping up with that, the challenges that you've kind of had with that transition into your current self? And yeah, basically what are you up to at the moment? What was like a 24-hour window look like for you?
2 hours sleep. No.
Like Elon Musk in bed at midnight, up at 4 a.m.
Easy. So for people who don't know my background that well, like I've been playing poker since 2005 and professional since 2011. And basically in 2015, I started making coaching videos, or actually in 2013, I started making coaching videos. And in 2015, I started streaming. 2017, started making my first products in terms of coaching courses. And in 2018, founded the company PLO Mastermind. Again, moved up from like one main course, PLO Mastermind for 4-card PLO, into software development, affiliate marketing, 5-card PLO, 5-card PLO software. And we moved from one coach, which was myself, to about 6 coaches, including mental game coaching as well, or coaches as well. So basically scaled up that operation. And I would say that I always felt pretty insecure about the transitioning phase, because the imposter syndrome creeps up your neck if you are transitioning from one point to another and you're trying to teach someone how to do what you did, but it's not the thing you're doing right now. Even though from an outside perspective, that sounds not logical, but that's the whole point. It's not that logical, but basically, traditionally, most poker players who are coaching are mainly poker players, or they used to be. It actually has changed in the last couple of years if you observe closely. But most poker players have been teaching by a more of a over-the-shoulder kind of method. Plain explains, I'm a poker player, I'm playing here, you can see how I'm playing and how I'm sort of breaking down certain ideas. This is the way I think about spots. Here you go, take what this serves you, essentially. And if you think about any other field, for example, building a business, right? Like, you wouldn't learn from an individual who is basically a 24/7 operator. Like, you wouldn't learn from someone who is like, I'm actually running a business, I'm also making the coaching content. Like, that doesn't work, because that's two jobs. And being a poker player and being a coach are also two separate things. And if you're combining both, then you have what I would call the more old school traditional model, which is, I'm actually a poker player, but sometimes I'm a coach. For example, right now I'm recording a video and I'm talking about my thoughts, but I'm not really a coach. I'm just a poker player who makes a coaching video. And as we progress in the industry, we start learning that, well, if you actually focus your content around the individual that is trying to get coached and not around yourself, you can help more. For example, there's a guy that says, I want to learn how to quickly get from PLO 50 to PLO 100. What do I need to know? And I'm playing mid or high stakes. Like, if I'm coming from my position, it's difficult to teach, because I'm not empathizing with the current position that he's in. So I need to actually take a step back and say, it doesn't matter who I am. What matters is, who's this guy and what is he trying to achieve? Why is he trying to move from PLO 50 to 100? What are this guy's problem? And not necessarily what was I struggling with 10 years ago, PLO 50 to 100. This is a different day and age. What is he struggling with right now? What are the tools available right now? How can we improve them? What data does he need? What softwares are around? What rake structures are offered by the poker industry to dive in and make it a success? So over the years, since 2017, 18, I became more and more comfortable with the idea that I'm like focusing on helping people. That's my business model. And I'm moving away from playing poker all day long, because it actually hurts the amount of time I can dedicate to help other people become better. And that is a challenge, because it does bring up this imposter idea. So basically, imposter syndrome is if you feel like you're not worthy of the position you're in, or you're not, like, you're kind of like a fraud, right? But because I'm not waking up playing 8 hours of poker a day anymore, you start asking yourself, am I qualified to teach? Instead of teaching and asking other people, was this helpful? Am I qualified to teach? Because that should be the metrics and not what you do on a day-by-day basis. So we changed our entire perspective in the business on, this is not about us, it's about them. It's about, what do these guys need to move up or get better? And then what you will realize is that a lot of poker players, what they want these days is they want to have shortcuts in a good way, though. For example, I don't want to run all the sims. I don't want to invest in running all the sims, right? I don't want to dissect all the sims. Give me some metrics, give me some data points, give me some concepts, give me something I can learn, digest, and then use at the table. And doing that takes a lot of time, because there's very little benefit for myself as a poker player for two reasons. Number one, if for example, if you play PLO 50, you want to move to 100, but you want to learn 5 concepts that probably hold you back. And I'm working for 2 days on those 5 concepts. Talk with other people that are playing similar stakes, maybe that already made the transition, collect some data on population tendencies, think about rake structures, rake back systems on different sides, come back with the answer after 2 days. I'm not going to benefit from it, because I'm not playing the stake, or I'm not playing at all. So it completely takes you out of the equation as a poker player. And it takes time to accept that if you've been a poker player like myself for 10 plus years. So you start making these pieces of value that actually don't benefit you anymore as a poker player, because you're not anymore. And that transitioning phase, there was some friction basically within this process, which has now been removed. And I'm now more comfortable than ever to say, like, we create a great product, because I mean, most of our coaches are poker players, but like the key people who sort of curate the content and figure out what the ideas are, figure out what the topics are people are requesting, they are mainly in charge of that and not of playing poker. And that's basically what I would say my main daily routine is based on. So for me, I figured the difference between before and now is when you play mid stakes to high stakes PLO, which was basically my life before, you are completely you're completely oriented around the action, which means where is action, when is action, what kind of action, how do you get in? It's all about that. There's a massive difference between low stakes to mid and high stakes. At low stakes, you know when the action runs. Or in tournaments, you know when the action runs because there's a schedule and you know that you will be able to play 12 tables on Sunday evening. You know how much buy-ins there will be. You usually know about the field a little bit more, like how soft it will be and so on. You know when the rest day comes in. As a cash game player, you don't have that luxury, which is a huge detriment to your routine because you can't plan. You could say, I'm gonna be at my table and find action at 12 a.m. on this day, but if there will be action or not is another question. And if there is one table or two table of action, it might be not enough for you to feel satisfied with the action. Like your hourly is actually pretty low, but at the same time, you can't do anything else because you just can't. Like you can't and shouldn't, by the way, open like solvers and say, I'm gonna like study on the side because you should. Yeah, that's what I thought a lot about. It's like, holy shit, I would like to play this one table, but I also create some content at the same time, but I can't because you just can't. Like you will be labeled as an RTA player and then you will be banned. So you're stuck sitting on one table or two tables that are waiting for action, and it's pretty tough. So I would say that what made it easier for me to transition from poker into business and coaching was to realize that I can either wake up and play lower stakes PLO, like up to 1, 2, 2, 4 PLO on a consistent basis day by day, or 2, 5 PLO on a day by day basis, and then do that. Which I've done for 10 years, so that at some point I'm like, okay, I'm not like leveling up here. I'm not like improving anything. I'm not learning new things. Or I can completely focus on mid-high stakes action, or actually go more into coaching and business. And the thing is, when you are at a point where you make a living playing poker at mid stakes, as you become better, your rewards start declining. So what I mean by that is, let's say you are a really good mid-stakes player and you make 200K a year. And I basically in my career, I would make like an average, I would say like 150 to 200K playing mid-stakes PLO from like 2011 to 2020, right? And then you're trying to move the needle and you're trying to move up in stakes. It is actually pretty difficult because first of all, you have to find the games to play in. You have to expose a lot of capital to it to make it work. And also, as you become better, like let's say you become 5% better or 10% better, you're not going to make 5% or 10% more money. Like, you have to work for a very long time to actually like move up the needle and start making more money. And even then, going from 200K to 500K on a consistent basis is really difficult. It's very difficult to do that. If you compare though, opening up a business and going from 0 to 100K, it's pretty difficult. But from 100K to $1 million is actually not as difficult as going as a poker player from 100K to $1 million. It's really difficult to do that. And obviously not everyone strives for that, but that's my goal basically, is like to make more money, find the vehicle to do that. And in poker, unless you are exposed to really good opportunities, it's very hard to break the 200K mark. Opportunities could be, you live in Vegas, you move it in stakes, you have access to a great game at high stakes, awesome. Maybe you have access to capital, amazing. You get in there, you move from 200K to 500K, amazing. I'm not sure how long this is going to work, but maybe a while, because maybe there's money in the city, or you live in Texas or Florida, awesome.
Yeah.
Not going to happen here, right? As a tournament player, you might get lucky and make $1 million in a year, exposing not that much capital to it. Like you might have an average buy-in of, let's say, $500 to $1,000. And even then, it's like quite a bit of capital a month. Let's say you have an average buy-in of like $300, and then making 500K is also pretty difficult. Like you have to put a lot of money at risk. You can run a 200K downswing stretch easily, or even more. And then maybe you make the 500K, maybe you make 100K, maybe you lose 50K. So all I'm trying to say is, I think poker was a great vehicle for me to go from zero, or basically zero, no job, obviously, to making a consistent $150,000 to $200,000 a year. But then moving beyond that, the options were less attractive. And I think that this is true for most poker players. Again, if you're exposed to a great opportunity, or if you're let's say you're a Patrick Leonard, you have a lot of capital, a lot of knowledge, and you can just travel the world and play the softest tournaments. I think that's a great opportunity vehicle to be in and take advantage of it. But for a lot of other players, they don't have that situation set up, and they need to think, do I want to stick with my 100K job a year and slowly go down, or do I start making moves in a different direction, essentially? And that is what eventually sort of like moved the needle for me to say, okay, look, if I play 2-5 PLO tomorrow morning, it doesn't matter. Like, it's not going to help the customer in PLO mastermind, and it's not going to help myself. I need to transition into something else which has more scaling effects behind it. Which is a very long answer to now the final answer, which is my daily routine.
No, you're good. You're good.
So basically, I used to wake up very late because all the action would be focused around American clocks. So basically, trying to get on ACR or trying to play people on the Asian time zone, basically on GG after midnight, right? And that was, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't great either, because there is a very long stretch period throughout the day. So even if you wake up at 1 p.m., if you have to wait till midnight to actually play, like, what are you going to do the whole day? Like, it's a pretty long day. And by midnight, you're pretty tired. So it's not like the wake up, meditate, I'm going to head into my 8-hour workday. That's not the flow of that. It's like, wake up, take it easy. Don't work out too hard. Do some studying, then play at midnight, go to bed at 6, maybe at 2, because there was no action. So it wasn't, that amazing. Today, my rhythm is different. Here's my strategy. Wake up as early as possible, and then work on one consistent flow for as long as possible until I get tired, which is usually, let's say I wake up at 6 a.m. I would work until like 3, 4, 5 p.m. And then I'm completely free. I can work out. If I want to work out and destroy myself, who cares? I'm not going to work on that day anymore. I'm going to go out with my girlfriend and eat something. I'm going to relax, watch TV. Like, all these things don't matter, because by the time 10 p.m. hits, I'm already so tired from the day. I'm easily going to bed, waking up at 6 a.m. again, and just pushing another like 10-hour, 12-hour day the next day easily until I get tired. And I can do all this in like one go, in the sense of, obviously there are breaks and there's like a lunch and all this stuff, but I'm not going to get distracted by a workout, a longer break, or anything like that. I'm just going to push in one go, and then say the end of the evening, the end of the day is all reserved for just relaxation.
That sounds really healthy. Yeah, what I've been doing recently, so my day is wake up naturally as early as possible, go for a walk, go for breakfast, come back, grind, and then go to the gym in like the afternoon, and then after the gym continue to grind. And now I'm thinking, what if wake up, do all that good stuff, and just grind all the way through whilst the focus and intensity is there, and like I'm feeling good, and then move like my workout to after the work day, if you will. That makes a lot of sense.
Releases a lot of tension. You don't have to think about what if or afterwards or then. And also the workout itself. I just noticed that if I used to work out sometimes in the morning, which was amazing for the workout. You wake up, double espresso, 2-hour gym, go to the steam room. You come home, you're like, I just want to sleep and chill. It was amazing.
100%.
But I'm not a professional bodybuilder. Like, I need to do some work.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. We were doing that for like the first month in Thailand. And after like a month of napping from 11 a.m. till 1 p.m., I was like, nah, like, sure, it feels good. You're at the gym for 7:30. You've had the protein shake. You know, you lifted for a couple of hours, but still, it's just, yeah. I was like, I can't be napping. I'm 27 years old.
Yeah.
Well, I'm still guilty of that. I'm still very guilty. Where did this whole desire, I'm going to call it desire because, well, yeah, I guess it was like, where did the desire to create content come from in the first place? Like, did you have mentors around you that kind of said, hey, Fernando, have you thought about, you know, using the knowledge that you've acquired over your years as a professional poker player and being of service to other people that are struggling? Or was it like an epiphany you had on your own at the time?
Dude, if I were to, I mean, I do sell a product, but like a couple of years back, I did a little what is it called, like a commercial, you can say, for another company that I was working with, and they pitched me this idea of, like, you know, the way you pitch a product is like you come up with this epiphany in the beginning, and you're like, I used to suck at poker, but then the epiphany from the stars came to, you know, hit me so strong, and suddenly I crushed, you know. No, there is no epiphany. The thing is, you know, the harsh reality again, like, I'm not bashing on poker as an opportunity vehicle, because it helped me to get to the place where I'm at. And I'm very happy I found it, and it allowed me to do amazing things, basically. But I'm like extremely grateful that I found a transitioning point, which I think is what a lot of people will get nervous about at some point. Because we're not all Doyle Brunson, you know, like, we're not like in there until we're 80, essentially, and making good money and having a good life. So basically, I was always a teacher. I always loved two things. My highest value in terms of, my highest value, basically, something that I value the most is just learning. That's like I love learning. So naturally, I love consuming content that is useful and helpful, new skills, new ideas, concept, mental models. I love it, right? How to coach someone. I take the ideas, put it in action. I love it. And the second one is I also love to coach people. That's sort of combination. And I do this now through the company by just working with people and asking questions, right? And figuring out, what do you want? What do you want? Where can we take this? And I also really appreciate the idea of building a product. Like, I like the idea of I am building something that like emphasizing with people, understanding where they're coming from, what they need, and then delivering something that's really sharp. Because I personally also like to consume services and goods that are high level. You know, like, you go to a high-end restaurant and you realize, like, I like look at all the details. This guy, like, the waiter comes from this side. Okay, we have this, like, for example, we went to this restaurant recently, like, my girlfriend eats switches fork and knife, and then the guy realizes it, and then positions, like, brings new forks and knife because she made them dirty in the right order, right? Because he understands, right? Exactly. Yeah. And then she told me, like, the last time we went to a different restaurant, they actually took her existing knife and put it back because they felt like they made a mistake in the restaurant positioning it wrong, instead of realizing she changed it because she wants to eat a different way. Small things like that, I realized and say, this is amazing. Like, these guys have perfected this craft. They understand the service really well. This is high level. Like, they care about quality so much. And I appreciate it as a customer. I want to, you go into a nice hotel, you notice the small details, the little music in the background. Like, we went to this hotel recently where we arrived with the car, and I pitched it to my girlfriend. I was like, we're going to go to the Alps, which was just like last week. And that was this week. And it's going to be a great hotel. We arrive at the hotel, out of the car, no one there. We're like, well, where are the people? Who's going to take this luggage? And I'm like, I guess we're going to take the fucking luggage. And we just, like, drag it into the hotel. And, like, what is this? Isn't this supposed to be, like, I didn't say anything, but I was like, isn't this, like, supposed to be like a good place? Like, no one takes care of my luggage. It's like, what is this? And so small things like that I notice. And then I like to take them in and then think about how they apply in the company. Okay, the product that I'm offering, like, what do people notice? Like, what are the small details? What do they care about? And then put that in action. So I always like these things before I even started playing poker. What I think is interesting, though, for people listening is the idea of skill set is also a mental model, skill set versus opportunity level. Again, I learned this from Alex Hormozi, which is it's a weird name, but if you look it up, trust me, Alex Hormozi. So skill set versus opportunity level. And I can tell you how he, maybe it makes more sense if I explain it like in his, like the way he experienced it. So he went to a mastermind. He was a gym owner and he had 6 gyms and he built them up one by one. He's a massive dude as well. And he went to this mastermind of Russell Brunson, who is the founder of ClickFunnels, which is the company that helps basically online companies scale and convert, worth like over $100 million. He went to this mastermind and then pitched the mastermind. A mastermind is basically a congregation of people that just talk about different business ideas, for example. And he said like, hey, look, I built up these 6 businesses and here's the way I did it and build up this, build up this, build up this. Now I want to go to like 20. How do I do that? And then this Russell Brunson said, you shouldn't run a gym. Like you should tell people how to run gyms and scale them. You have a level 10 skill set and you're using it on a level 2 opportunity, which is opening your next gym.
Okay.
And he went from going, like he made probably like, I think he made like, I don't know, 300K in like the next 3 years, he made like $25 million. And today he makes like $100 million a year in revenue in his company called acquisition.com. But that stuck with me a lot. Like what skill set do you have? And on what opportunity vehicle are you applying it essentially? And if you are, again, going back to, who can I name? Let's say if you're Ben fucking 86 and you're playing poker, I would say you're probably using your skill set really well in the right opportunity vehicle at the right time. You're making millions of dollars on your skill set. Amazing. You're crushing it. You know, should this guy 10 years ago, should he have went into investing? Probably not. Like he did a great job. You know, that was great. But for me personally, I was at mid-stakes PLO making 200K a year. And I was like, it's getting really, really hard for my skill sets to move to $500,000 a year. And also on the industry, I don't live in Vegas. I don't live in California. I don't go to the Texas hustle life and make money there. That's not my life. I have a different skill set. So if I know how to make $200,000 a year and I will teach thousands of people how to do that, that opportunity vehicle sounds way better than trying to go from 200 to 300 playing poker. So what? Yeah. And the reason I'm saying this is because like other people that listen to this and they think, hey, I'm smart, I'm young, I'm driven, I have something to offer the world, and they're potentially wasting it playing poker when they might actually have other vehicles in front of them to jump into and make something happen. Because again, if you run a business, and I'm not like, this is not uncommon at all. If you run a business and you have the skill set to think about a product and make $100,000 in revenue, going from 100 to 1 million isn't that impossible. Like it's not that difficult to just find more customers or make another product or scale up your business. In poker, if you're crushing it at $200,000 a year, going to 1 million is tough. It's really, think about how this would logically work. Like what tournaments do you have to play? What cash games do you have to grind? What liquidity do you have to be exposed to make another $1 million? Not that year, every year that comes afterwards as well. It's really tough. It's really tough. And then if you look at guys that made $10 million in business, they are not 1 million times smarter than you, but they use their skill set to an opportunity vehicle that is really well, that's a really good match. It matches really well. And then they apply themselves to it and say, this is something I need to double down. For example, this guy, Alex Hormozi, he goes up there, jack dude, I'm running gyms. I want to go to 20 and make, I don't know, $500,000 a year. This guy's like, you're doing it all wrong. You are really great at telling people how to do this. Change into change into a franchise business where you actually tell people and the system behind scaling up the businesses. And then he did that for like 4,600 businesses worldwide, and turned 2 years later $25 million around in revenue, which again is not some like this guy. This guy's 33 now. Like all I'm saying is, a lot of poker players, they had a good time. That's awesome. And they might want to continue doing the grind to build up $100,000 roll, $200,000 roll, right? Where they are comfortable to discover new opportunities in the market without having to take a 9 to 5, where they're just grinding without any purpose and without any exit plan. But if you are at the point where you do have some capital and you have some leeway, you have some time essentially to your hands, maybe you can buy some courses, you can try some things in the market. I would really consider to think about what other opportunities are out there with your current skill set and your current position, your network, your intelligence, your drive, which will go away when you're 50, 40, who knows? What can you do right now to take it to the next level, essentially, for you as an individual?
Yeah. I think, well, there's a few things to touch on that. Like, firstly, the comfort zone of grinding, right? Like, it's something that is hardwired into you. Say you're 25 years old and you dropped out of uni when you were 19 to pursue poker. Like, it's all you've known. It's how you've identified yourself. You told your family that you were dropping out of college or whatever it was in order to pursue poker. There was probably, for the most part, a decent amount of adversity there. At least there was on my end. So I can understand people wanting to hold on to that identity for as long as possible and not having, it's not necessarily self-awareness, but the vision to see these new opportunities when they present themselves. Because I'm sure there are a lot of poker players that, are making healthy 6 figures or decent 5 figures, where if you compare it to the hedonic treadmill of the 9 to 5, for 30K a year, poker gives them their freedom, allows them to travel the world, it allows them to live a certain lifestyle, if you will. And that all brings a lot of comfort. So stepping out of that comfort zone in order to pursue the unknown is a very daunting task. It is a very daunting task. And it is something that I personally have really enjoyed with Obex, because I've always said that, like, I know I'm not going to be grinding poker when I'm 40 years old. I don't want to grind poker when I'm 40 years old. I always saw poker as a way of giving me the freedom I always desired as a kid. Like, growing up, I was obsessed with geography. I was obsessed with traveling the world, Asia, everything. I wanted to see the world. And poker has given me that in my 20s. But now I'm thinking, I'm getting to the point now where I'm 28 this year. And I'm like, right, now I'm thinking about the next chapter of my life. I would like to personally have a family around the age of 35. So it's like the next 8 years or so. Do I want to be grinding poker on GG, and like, grinding long hours? Or do I want to have actually built something that generates passive income for me when I'm, I want to generate different passive income sources so that I feel comfortable in my role as a dad, as a husband, or whatever it is, as a family man, because again, those are lessons that I saw growing up in the discomforts of certain family members of mine, where I could see that was a burden, and that's something I always, I don't want to have. So I empathize. I do empathize a lot, because it's not easy making that transition when all you have known. It's like with any habit. Any habit, like quitting drinking or smoking, whatever, like, it's not easy to get out of, because that thing has always brought you comfort, or a certain level of comfort. It's all you've known. So how would you, I guess, go about helping people find that transition or ease into that transition? Like, I guess it would start with, maybe reading 1 book a month on a certain subject, like building knowledge in a new area that you feel would bring you a sense of purpose, that you are being of service to other people. Because that whole question of, what's my purpose in life? Like, come on, man, you know what I mean? Like, it's such a
why does it matter to have a purpose? That's the thing.
Well,
just
I mean,
just do it.
Yeah, but the thing is I think a lot of people pursue things that isn't for them, right? Like, sure. They don't find any purpose in what they do, and that ultimately it leads to depression or unhappy.
All I would say there is, I know that this thought of what's my passion, what's my purpose, it can also hold you back a lot in taking action, because usually what you already do and are good at, it then becomes your purpose, right? Like you do something, you start running a business, or you have a family, and then once you have the family, that's your purpose. Like it's not before you have the family. Like my purpose is to have a family. Like, well, you don't know exactly how it's going to work out and go out, but then once you have it, you know, hey, this is actually my purpose. This is what I'm grinding for, because you're already in. And I would say the same thing is true for acquiring knowledge. I wouldn't try to acquire too much knowledge, because what I said at the beginning, which is learn things and read things as you're in it. You're in sales, you take up a sales job, or like you start working with someone who has a product to sell and he wants some salesperson. Okay, like learn about sales when you are doing the sales, and then realize, oh shit, the reason I didn't sell yesterday is because in this book, I didn't use this. Okay, makes sense. Tomorrow I'm going to change it. Or about business. Also, one thing is, in terms of advice or things that I feel sort of strongly about, is I wouldn't think about passive income at all right now. I would think about active income in a different area and focus on income. So active income can be beautiful, because like you're running a business, you're up early, you're doing your thing, you're making the money, you're building something up, and you can build a family. Like this is all test and proven. This is all going to work out. I think passive income becomes more interesting once you
play golf.
Yeah, for example, but also if you're at a point where your the amount of money you have in the bank is so big that not investing it smartly is actually going to cost you a ton of money, and maybe you're making more money investing the money than taking your normal job, then it makes sense to say, I have millions in the bank. If I position them rightly, I'm actually making more money with that than my day-to-day operations. I should actually allocate some of my focus on that. And then I think it makes sense, because you're spewing basically money around by not doing it. But until that point, like building up an income stream that is consistent in an active way I think is preferable. And then thinking more about how to optimize your active income source and saying, okay, I started off as a grinder in the business, and then now I'm starting to automate, hire, develop people, scale products, or hire more people in order to remove yourself out of the company or operations. I think that makes also a lot of sense. But first you have to find that, or you have to build that business essentially in the first place. And also my last thought on this is also, I think if you're in a position where you haven't, let's put it this way. If you, not you personally, if a poker player has a huge amount of money in the bank, I would say they're generally not in the best position to transition, because they have a ton of comfort. But if you're in a position where you have a decent bankroll but not amazing, you're generally better off, because you have the hunger to actually go from 200K to $1 million and say, I have 200K, this is good, but in 2 years I need a lot more, or I need more money to maintain what I'm doing here, or to make something happen. I'm not going to sit on this thing. The issue with poker players who, for example, win a couple of big tournaments is that they have so much money in the bank that they mathematically think, well, I can last with this money for a couple of years. And then what they do is they either do not transition, or they transition half-assed, because they can allow themselves to spew business-wise. It's like, well, I'm gonna start this NFT thing, and then you spew like 50K and nothing happens, and you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna continue playing poker first of all, because like this is all weird, and I don't. But if you need the fucking money, you're like, I'm gonna invest the 50K of my 150K roll. I'm gonna turn this into something great. I'm gonna make this happen because I need to do it. I think that's generally a better position to be in.
Definitely. Yeah, there are a couple of faces that came to mind there. I thought of, friends that have won a few tournaments before turning 22, 23. And yeah, 23-year-old millionaires are a fascinating species. I can tell you that much there. So there's plenty of them in the poker world. I know I don't want to dive into into too much detail about the actual business itself or the company, but one of the things that has got me very excited is Pot Limit Omaha 5-card PLO. For people at home that only know Texas Hold'em, you obviously have the more popular variant of Pot Limit Omaha, which is the 4-card variant. But now over, I want to say since the beginning of COVID, the last year and a half, 2 years or so, you've seen an increase of dealer's choice games at casinos, at private games, at home games of 4, 5, 6-card. And the product that you recently launched, the reason it has me excited is because everyone up until now, similarly with PLO and Hold'em pre-solver era, has kind of just been winging their strategies with 5-card PLO. It's been very, don't get me wrong, that there's obviously a lot of crushers that have used their foundations and their launch from 4-card and brought it over into 5-card. But for the general population, for the newcomer, the semi-pro, the amateur, the recreational, the amount of knowledge that has been out there up until now has been very limited. You have to either know people who are willing to, give you solves that they've ran or spreadsheets and whatnot. And you've now created this course. And I personally haven't been through it myself, but the feedback that I've heard from other poker players is pretty exciting in terms of the way the game is now going to evolve, mainly from professionals, because they're mainly going to be the ones that consume your product. But I think the most exciting part is that everyone is quickly realizing after you release your course that even like the guys that have been crushing the games have been playing way too loose. Like we need to be playing infinitely tighter. Like it was like 5 cards, 30% VPIP sounds about right. No, mate. Like you need to bring that down another 5 or 6 pips. But yeah, just briefly, that whole course, the development of it, how it came about, and what the people at home who are potentially looking at getting better at 5-card or moving into 5-card, just a couple of things that you could share about the course and the creation of it as well. What kind of development goes into a work that's extensive?
Well, I think the most important change in 5-card is just the introduction of a solver. So like in the last year, private solvers. So a private solver is basically some talented young coder codes like a 5-card solver and starts optimizing it so that actual computers can run it and stuff, and then starts selling it to individuals at a very high price. And at some point, it will reach a guy like me, who's then gonna make a business out of it and scale it essentially. And when that happens, you move from a private market to a public market of 5 cards solves. And the difference there for 4-card is, I mean, look at how 4-card changed since the introduction of Monker Solver. And 4-card was actually around, including coaching videos, way even before. And even then, Monker Solver made a huge difference on 4-card PLO. And if you look at 5-card PLO, there are almost no 5-card coaching videos available at all. And now there's an introduction of a solver and coaching videos, which is basically how our product works. We have videos and solver. And as you can tell, I'm mainly interested in the business aspect of poker, which is how can you use poker to make money and then make your life better? And 5-card PLO is a really interesting vehicle right now because no one knows how to play it, and there is software out there now, and also videos that will help you to gain an edge. And every edge is limited. Like every market reaches a certain level of efficiency after a while. In 4-card and 5-card and 2-card cash, every market at some point gets more and more saturated, either because players get better or the sites realize the players make too much money, let's increase the rake. Or unpreferably, but this is actually what kind of happened in the last couple of years, both happens. Rate goes up, plus players get better. And then the saturation is like the money gets more evenly distributed towards poker sites and then some of the top-notch professionals. In 5-card Omaha right now, there's still it's still an unexplored ground from all areas, like when it comes to the sites offering it as well as the players playing it. And it's a limited window essentially. And like someone, for example, messaged me, like when we were thinking about the pricing of our product, So what someone messaged me and said, well, you have less videos in the 5 card than in the 4 card, which is understandable because we have like 800 videos in the 4 card product and not as many, like 40, 50 videos in the 5 cards. But you're charging kind of the similar price. And and I told this guy, it's not based on the amount of videos. It's based on the opportunity that allows you to be realized given the content. So if no one has any videos on 5 card PLO and you get 50, what's your advantage over most people in 4 card have watched some sort of 4 card content, use solvers, work with whatever software and product they use over the last couple of years, you getting access to 800 videos versus you getting access to solves nobody ever has seen, 50 videos no one has ever seen. The opportunity is much bigger. We should charge even more because it's not about the videos. Again, it's about the value you can deliver it within the marketplace at the moment, which will change in the next couple of years. So that's the way I think about 5 card PLO. And in terms of like how to catch up and get into it, I mean, it depends on the situation you're in right now in terms of you as a poker player. But if you have the time and capacity, I would probably just jump. Like if you have access to the games that have 5 card in there and you think they're beatable, like the environment you're actually in, like you look at the rake structure, you look at your opponents, and you look at the frequency of the games that run. Can you move up in limits? Like if there's only low stakes available, you might not want to learn it. But if there's like mid and high stakes available as well, and you can see a trajectory for yourself for the next 2-3 years, like what's the plan? Go fucking all in and then get out. Like go in, make your money, and then as the market catches up and saturates, get out. Like that's the business plan of it essentially. Why are people sort of like moving into an opportunity slowly? It's like if it gets harder, if it's going to be out there for a couple of years, which I'm completely convinced the 5 card, it's not going anywhere. Similar to like knowing a couple years back, Bitcoin will be a thing. Should you go in slow or wait it out? Like, no, you go in fast because with Bitcoin, we didn't know. I mean, I didn't know, and otherwise I wouldn't be here, but I would be in fucking nowhere. But the point is 5 card PLO is going nowhere, and it will be harder because we know from all the other poker games that it will become harder at some point. If you want to go all in, like do it now and don't do it, like all these guys that tell me, I wish I would have started PLO 5 years ago. Like now it's over. They will say the same thing about 5 card PLO in 3 years. I wish I would have started earlier. Now it's too late. It's always the same thing. It's a repeating theme, basically.
Brilliant stuff. No, definitely. I mean, I'm gonna be including a lot of the subjects that we have discussed in the podcast show notes, from the mental models that we mentioned from Shane Parrish, Charlie Munger over at Farnham Street, and then the mental models that you were talking about. Can you just say the name one more time?
To follow Alex Hormozy out there and then just learn, because that's where I have everything from, basically, from like what would Jesus do / what would the billionaire do, instead of yourself thinking about changing your belief system, comparing yourself to others is more of an idea of Jordan Peterson, where he talks about how comparing yourself with others that are a level up on you is just going to be a recipe to make you miserable, basically. But at the end of the day, like I think a lot of people would enjoy themselves more as poker players if they learn a few things outside of poker. Like read a few books, catch up on some interesting topics in the world of how to make more money, whether it is psychology or an actual skill set. Learn a few new things, because once you do that, you will realize that poker is not the only space where people, like, where there's a soft ground. Like in business, a lot of people are spewing as well. Like they're also not like the most sophisticated individuals, and like you can actually get an edge in the market. Like look at the poker market. Like if poker coaching would be so tough, why are there so many competitors? Why isn't there just like one player and that's it? It's obviously because, like I think it is mainly because poker players that are successful have so much money that they don't need to make their coaching business ultra successful, and therefore they don't compete as hard as in other industries in the world, which is great if you want to run a coaching business. But you will see in other spaces as well that there's a lot of money laying around. For example, if you're interested in cryptocurrency, which you guys are also dealing with, right? Well, there is a lot of conversation right now about NFTs or Twitter Space why not collect all the useful information in one community and say, here's the tweet from this guy, and here's my, I don't know, interpretation of it. This is a scam. This is something valuable, interesting project. Follow this guy. This guy talks about this subject. Here's my interpretation. Here's my podcast. Here's my explanation of it. Someone needs to guide all this information
Noise.
exactly in some way and say, hey, look, you want to get into NFTs or you want to get into cryptocurrency? I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide, or follow me along with my community, where I'm going to let you know what are valuable things to read, people to follow, projects to look at, how to recognize a scam, when is the next rug pull, like all this. There's a lot of loose money essentially around and a lot of interest. So the space is very soft. And that always means that there are obviously opportunities out there to make some good money and make a business model out of it. Even if you don't launch a cryptocurrency or NFT yourself, like there's still a ton of people that are looking for something, some value creation within the space.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much money in poker. Like I was very fortunate in the sense that I woke up one morning and I was doing commentary on a very high level. Very fortunate to meet the right people at the right time, and opportunities presented themselves and whatnot. And it became very clear to me as I grew closer with like the production teams involved, as I grew closer with the tournament directors and people organizing these events and stuff like that. I was like, oh, this is actually where the real money can be made. Like in the actual industry, not trying to fucking move up to $25, $50 online and like spend the next 10 years getting there. Like, and now we're at a point where, we've launched Obex, and it's evident that, we're probably not going to make profit for the first year or whatever it is, but we're not trying to make profit straight away. Like we're okay with our finances. We want to focus more on who we are, our identity, because we still don't know what we are. Like we're still very young. We still don't know what we're trying to achieve. But one thing has been very abundantly clear since the beginning is that we want to build our product around a community. If you look after the community looks after you. It's as simple as that. Like you see that in every area of business, or most businesses, where the consumer is well looked after, they then in turn look after the business, right? So that's I think like that's our like main focus from like a business point of view, is just really ensuring that everyone within our community feels like they are receiving some form of value from us, whether it's through this, for a conversation with amazing guests that have a lot to share, whether it's firing a hand history over to Ben or Espen in a Discord server, proven players that are being the highest stakes, whether it's inclusivity in, vlogs or giveaways or all this kind of stuff. And I think hopefully, I mean, maybe I'm just being a bit of a hopeless romantic, but I do believe that we will eventually get to a point where, that will generate a decent turnover and make money. And like, yeah, we haven't really spoken about like merchandise or anything like that, but, we'll also get into that area at some point. But for now, we're just not really too focused on any of that.
Yeah, you have an interesting group of people because you guys have resources and skill and drive. I would say that there's this other phrase that there's this economy professor who asks the students, if you run a hot dog stand, like what advantage would you want to have over, like what advantage you would have if you can choose, right? Is it location, the best hot dogs? Like what exactly do you want as a business? And the answer is the most valuable thing to have is a starving crowd, because then it doesn't matter where you are and it doesn't matter what you sell. People are starving. They need it. They want it. You solve a true problem. And that really stuck with me because so for example, you're saying, okay, look, we're trying to serve all these people in the community, right? And we tried that as well. The challenge behind it is if you serve too many, like you don't really help anyone really, right? Like someone that is starving is like, you changed my life. You changed my life because I needed this. You solved the problem. You helped the desire. I owe you everything. Like, this is amazing, right? So what I think is, okay, you have the community, but within the community, there are some starving people that are starving for certain desires. It could be strategy. It could be balance. I mean, usually there are like 3 fields: health, wealth, and relationships. I personally engage mostly in wealth and trying to make people more money and build my business around that. But obviously the other 2 are also possibilities. But I would think, in which area do we want to solve an actual big problem? What like, do enough people have this problem? Is it a real problem? Can we solve it? Are people willing to pay enough money to have the problem resolved? And you don't even have to monetize the solution right away. You can also build the brand or part of the brand around it. For example, how many people within poker have a desire to reinvest their money maybe into the crypto space, and they don't really know what to do, where to do, how not to get scammed, because they are focusing so much of their time on poker, which is what they should do, because that's how they make the main income. But they do want to diversify in some ways to crypto. Okay, so you can either give these guys a guide on how to inform themselves or inform them how to make better investments, which you can charge X, or you can actually make the investment for them and charge even more, because you're then doing the entire service for them. Just as an example of saying, here's the actual problem, we can solve it in different ways and charge more or less. It just depends on, are we able to solve the problem, and can we make it work in terms of the economics? Can we charge enough money where it does make sense for us to provide the service, and then back to people? And if you know that this is the core of your business, like this is the core problem you're solving, or one of the core problems, you can start building the free content space around it and say, okay, if our mission is to make poker players like people in the poker space financially more savvy, let's just say that would be an example, then we can start building up content around this idea within the podcast. Okay, the podcast idea is, let's get people on who are already financially savvy, understand poker, or who don't understand poker, and build a connection bridge. Or let's release a newsletter. Let's create a Discord group around the subject. Let's hear people out. What are you struggling with when it comes to this specific topic? What do you want to get solved? What do you want to get resolved? And then start building it, start building sort of your mission around it. And as you do that, and when you start solving real problems, like really big problems, the business model derives automatically from it, because people are looking to hand you money for solving this massive problem that they have.
Yeah,
that's how would like not restructure, but that's how I would find more specificity in the direction that you guys are heading, essentially.
Well, let us continue putting out free content for the rest of 2022, and then beginning of 2023, we're gonna hop on a call as a company with you as a business consultant, and we'll see what we can come up with. Because I feel like there's, firstly, like I'm not even joking. We're very fortunate with the network that we have and the people that we know. And the thing is like, we're all new to this. We're all making mistakes. There's something you mentioned very early on in this conversation is about being a poker player and not really knowing how to not slack in other areas, because all you know is poker. And that has been pretty evident in what we've done. If we all had to be honest, that there have been times where we're like, okay, we know we should be making content, but we're not content creators. So how do you kind of force yourself to get out of bed and do it anyway? So having people like you, where we do get the company to a certain point and we're like, okay, right, who do we call in to help us scale to the next level, or to turn this into something that's actually generating profit for us now? So we're not just pumping money in and money in and money in. But no, listen, we are coming up to the 2 hour 20 mark, and I know you had a couple of questions that you wanted to kind of reverse the whole dynamic and throw some things over me. And then I normally I've only done 2 podcasts up until this point. I like to wrap up my conversation with a final fast 5, where basically I'll ask you 5 questions and you give single word answers or very short answers. But if you wanted to hold the floor quickly, for 5-10 minutes, as I know there are some things you wanted to discuss or throw my way. So,
yeah, well, I think that the whole OBEX operation is quite sort of built around the individuals, right? Like we have different characters in the crew.
Yes. Yeah.
And from my point of view as a consumer of the content, I would like to, sort of like learn more about you guys specifically. For example, you talk sometimes about your bankroll loss in some ways, the rebuilding phase. And that seems to be a really interesting theme that I like to learn more about just as a viewer to understand your position more, because you're hopping on a podcast, right? And you talk a lot about poker. And I don't mean this obviously in like you're not an authority, but more like what's your lens that you're applying in the conversation. I'm trying to understand that more. For example, you mentioned before, like you're waking up, you have a certain routine when it comes to playing poker. I wasn't even aware that you are playing poker consistently, even though I am a follower of OBEX and like different social media platforms and YouTube and whatnot. So why don't you share a little bit about what is your current, well, what are your current like daily routines and things that you want to engage with in terms to quote unquote build you up? Like what are you doing at the moment?
Yeah, well, firstly, just to kind of give context, like I have historically always treated poker like a lifestyle business. I've never really been obsessed with the end goal of being like a crusher. Like Espen, for example, if you ask Espen what he wants, he's at a stage now where he wants to, when his screen name pops up, people are like, oh shit, Espen's here kind of thing. Whereas I have always just, from a very early age, knew that poker could provide me with that freedom to travel the world, as we mentioned earlier on. And basically, the way I achieved that or have achieved that has just been by, game selection and really not playing in the toughest pools, not challenging myself to move up in stakes and have to like be knocked down again and whatnot. But with that comfort of, always moving the needle between 10K and 100K and never really, ever looking much further beyond the 6-figure net worth, or never really looking like, oh shit, I'm going to have to go and get a job. It's provided a certain level of like self-sabotage in me, if you will, where it's like, well, you've been in between these two pillars, if you will, for so long now that you don't know what it's like on the other side and you don't know what it's like on the other side. So whenever you're in the middle, you could just basically fuck around and do whatever you want. Now, sure, that is true to a certain degree. Like if you have a safety net, you can live a certain lifestyle, you can burn through cash, you can be a degenerate, you can spew to a certain level, like you can get away with being reckless. But that ultimately leaves a lot of important things in life very empty and very blank. And that was one of like the biggest wake-up calls for me, is just like, you are bouncing off walls around, the globe and have no real direction or trajectory. And basically it led up to September of last year where, I wasn't happy with what I had. And it's like, okay, I'm going to moonshot a game where I know there is variance in PLO. I know that this guy can pull up more money than me infinitely. Like he can just keep going to the cash desk and keep pulling up until I go broke, until he, wins a pot, which he will eventually. Like he's going to have 35% equity against my, whatever it is, and I'm going to lose heaps. And it's going to cost me more in terms of my current net worth and my future potential earnings. And that's basically what happened. Like my ego was just like, well, I'm going to continue playing this guy because, I don't feel like I'm worthy enough where I am at the moment. I'm not satisfied with my current net worth. I'm not satisfied with my current skill level. And my ego is telling me to play this guy and potentially make, 100K, 150K in a single session. So now the whole like last 6 months, 7 months, the rebuilding phase has just been a very, honestly, one of the most rewarding phases of my life, where where you are almost forced to reflect on who you've been and what you've been doing up until that point. Because when you are in a comfort zone, you're comfortable, right? Like you don't feel like the need to necessarily self-reflect or improve, because life is just giving you everything that you want. Like, you know, nice restaurants, nice locations, you have money in the bank, this, that, and the other. Whereas when you go broke, it kind of rekindles that fire and that drive to never let it happen again, and to ensure that you don't repeat past mistakes. And I'm very fortunate in the feedback loops that I have in place. I have friends that are not afraid to call me out on my bullshit. I've always been very good at surrounding myself with those types of people as well. And now it's all about just servicing the system rather than the goal, because I was always so obsessed with money, you know, growing up and in poker, that it was just like always about money, money, money. And it was never about the system. So now it's just like, okay, if I look at Espen, if I look at you, if I look at Jason Kuhn, Phil Galfond, all of these people that you could say have like fixed the game, like solved the game, if you will, in terms of life and poker. If you look at them, most of them aren't obsessed with money. They're very competitive. They're like top competitors when it comes to life and poker. But secondly, they don't focus on these short-term variants or the confirmation bias of a winning session or a winning week or a winning month. They focus on the system that they have in place that they know will eventually bring those results. And that is something that I have historically neglected. I look at Espen, for example, as a prime example, because he's one of the people that I am closer to on a day-to-day basis. And if you look at Espen's like hierarchy of needs, he services them all really well. And the end result is being very good at poker, and eventually you get the results. Like up until his WSOP score, for example, you know, he had been putting in the hours, studying, walking, fitness, healthy routine, all of those things. And eventually he got the result. And going back to like Charlie Munger from earlier on and like the inversion, if you, instead of trying to solve how can I be happy, and you flip it on its head, and it's like, okay, or how can I be successful in poker? Because we don't have all of the answers, right? Not all of us have the luxury of having wide networks where we can get the answer from other people. If you flip it on its head and you're like, okay, how can I be unsuccessful at poker? Well, if I fuck up my sleep schedule, if I eat loads of junk food, if I hate it when I'm grinding because I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I'm not socialized enough, I don't have a good friend circle, I'm not studying. If you look at those 6 things in poker as an example, if you avoid all of those, it's pretty obvious that you're going to be 95% of the way there to improving as a poker player. And that's how I'm trying to approach life at the moment, is rather than focusing on money in the bank, my session from yesterday, my session from this month, I'm trying to focus on the stuff that I know. By the way, when I say I know, I don't know personally, because I've only just discovered this journey that like I'm on, but I know because you see it in successful poker players. Like it is there in black and white as clear evidence in successful poker players that they look after the foundations, they look after the system, and the results eventually follow. So now that's why, I don't know if you've checked out any of our streams or listened to, you know, I know you listen to the Berkey podcast. I haven't enjoyed grinding this much in 5 years, because I'm not just grinding now for making money. I'm not just grinding to, you know, after an 8-hour session, be like, oh, I made $1,000 today, because $1,000 isn't going to make a difference in my life when I'm 40 years old. Like it, well, I don't know, maybe it would, maybe it will, touch wood, hopefully it doesn't. But if I look after the system that I'm implementing on a day-to-day routine, going to bed at 11 o'clock, before I go to bed, reading a book for recreational purposes for 30 minutes, disconnecting from my phone, disconnecting from Twitter, from Instagram, no screen time, just reading a book. And then as soon as I'm, 30 minutes, switching off the light, waking up naturally at 8 o'clock. As soon as I wake up, go for a walk on the beach. Like I'm servicing, being out in nature, being present, just like really waking up in a pleasant way. By the time I get home and I'm ready to grind, like I've serviced so many things that are going to help me long-term improve as a player. It might not affect my results on the day. I might, drop 10 buy-ins at 200 PLO. That may happen, but I've looked after my sleep. I'm well rested. I wasn't on my phone until, I went to sleep. I wasn't on my phone the first thing I woke up. I went out, got some movement in, got some, cardio in. I started off the day in a really good way. And that system has put me in a place where I am ready to win if the opportunity presents itself, if variance allows me to. And that has been a very tough pill to swallow. Like, you can ask Philip, you can ask Espen, like it's not something that I'm not there yet. Like, I'm still fucking up. There are still days when I don't roll out of bed until 2 p.m. because like I had a bad session the day before and I've let it affect me. Or there are still days where I'm like, I'll go to the gym tomorrow. I'm still recovering from boxing the other day. Like, my arm hurts, So there are still excuses that I'm making up, but having the feedback loop of friends that are like, get to the gym, Henry. You're going to be thankful. Henry in 4 years' time is going to be thankful that you went to the gym today. The fact that you don't have an 8-pack yet, or you can't run 10 kilometers yet, or you're not as aesthetically pleasing on the eyes as you want to be. Like, sure, short-term results wise, you're not there yet. But do you think that if you are consistently looking to improve 1% a day on who you were yesterday, every single day, that in 4 years' time, I'm going to look back and like, fuck, I wish I didn't go to the gym 6 days a week, man. I wish I didn't study an hour a day. I wish I didn't go to bed on time. Of course, you're going to be fucking grateful for that shit, And that's why, like, I'm absolutely like the vulnerability that Obex has provided me with, where I can just be really fucking honest, has brought me so much more. It like the sense of purpose and serving others, and the rewards from being honest and vulnerable, compared to the bravado that I had on for so long due to the imposter syndrome that was created through commentating on a high level, where I felt like if I'm commentating on a 100K high roller, then I need to be beating X stakes, like this whole imposter syndrome of pretending to be something that you're not. And yeah, I'm just much happier now, man. Like, I don't know. I'm really enjoying the grind. I'm really enjoying, I'm even enjoying the conflict of waking up in the morning and wanting to reach for my phone to check Instagram, because the reward that I get out of actually not doing it, like just stacking a W that day, I don't know, like the rewards are fucking insane, man. It's just like, fuck yeah, like you're getting there, like slowly but surely you're getting there. The conflict that you have where, oh, I'm comfortable, I'm grinding, I don't want to go to the gym, I'll go tomorrow. But then actually, you know what? I don't want to go to the gym right now, but I'm fucking going. Like, I'm going to go. Like, it's, I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it. It just brings a lot more, like a higher sense of gratitude, if you will, at present.
So you're in the zone, basically, or you're trying to get closer to the zone in that sense.
I'm trying to. It does make sense. I'm trying to now approach life and everything that I do with a beginner's mindset, which it isn't. Sometimes that can actually be detrimental. Like there is a fine line when it comes to, because there are things that you are just too qualified for to try and approach it from a beginner's mindset. But what I mean by approaching it from a beginner's mindset is the way that I communicate, rather than making statements to the point where my statement is the only thing that matters and no one else's opinion can make me move my goalpost. So trying to like stillman my views and opinions. When Espen or Philip or anyone in the team like says something that kind of triggers me internally, or I don't necessarily agree with, like trying to reflect internally and be like, okay, why is this triggering you? Like, why is this having an effect on you the way it is? Like, you know that Espen isn't necessarily attacking you. You know what Philip is saying is coming from a good place. So why is that? Like that path of self-discovery to just get rid of all the shit habits and beliefs, and more importantly, the identity that we have for ourselves, or on my journey, on a personal note for myself, where when you have created this identity and you refuse to shift what your beliefs are, you know, like you're going to get stuck. You're just going to be stuck in a continuous wheel where you're going to look back in 5 years' time and be like, shit, I haven't really progressed that much as a person over the last 5 years because you haven't allowed yourself that opportunity to grow. So yeah, that's mainly what it is, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like that was a bit of a tangent, but that's kind of like the journey that I'm on currently, because you wake up one morning and you realize like, shit, I keep on making the same mistakes. I keep on getting to 100K and then I'm spewing it all away. Or, you know, I start splashing out on women or lifestyle or whatever it is. Like I start neglecting my sleep. I start neglecting the gym. I start smoking again. I start partying too much. Like, why is that? Why do you keep making the same mistakes? Well, it's because, you know, it's a habit that you've built. The relationship that you have with yourself says that, you know, this is what we're used to. We're used to going from 10K to 100K and then all the way back down again. So now it's like, okay, how do we ensure that next time we're at 100K, instead of going from 100 to 0, we go from 100 to 200? And the only way you can do that is by approaching it, trying to approach life, at least in my mind, through a different lens, which is the lens of a beginner, and looking at the peers around you, the people that I look up to and admire, and try and use inversion to peel back their systems and the way that they approach everything, and then try and reshape the way that I approach things. And a lot of people, I have to give a lot of, I mean, I have the credit that I have to give to other people is endless. You know, from Galfond to Berkey to yourself, to a close friend of yours that mentored me at a important time of my development. And again, it was something that I took for granted and exploited. Like Sandra is a good friend of yours. There are so many people that I have to be thankful for and grateful for, that has like allowed me to get to this point of reflection now. And it's kind of like the question is now on me to not even let the other people down, but not let myself down, if that makes sense. Because that's all that I'd be doing, you know. Like if I fuck up again, like I'm not really letting anyone else down apart from myself, you know. Like it's not going to have that much of an impact on other people, because people just, they won't accept it, you know. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. It's a fun journey as well. It's a very fun journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you mentioned a couple of statements about belief that I'm quite curious on. So one of them is, for example, you said being vulnerable has a lot of rewards to you. Like, what are those rewards?
The rewards are being honest to myself. Like, so the whole bravado that I mentioned, and like the imposter syndrome, I feel like that I was trying to pretend to be something that I wasn't in order to fit in. Whereas through being
you
vulnerable,
or to others, pretending it
to me and to others, like
okay.
I was kidding myself, and I was you know, kidding everyone else, you know, just trying to pretend that I was doing things in poker that I wasn't, without, you know, like being truthful of like win rates or what I was playing, not by deliberately lying, like saying, oh, hey, I'm beating 2K PLO online, but by avoiding the actual subject, if that makes sense, which in itself is deceitful. Like when someone asks you, oh, hey, what are you playing? Rather than being honest and said, hey man, I actually just dropped back down to 100 PLO because like I got absolutely wrecked at 500. It would just be like, oh yeah, I'm just playing like low stakes PLO online, loads of mistakes online, and not actually being like showing the whole picture. So it's more rewarding in that sense, because it just allows you to just like being more transparent with like who you are, where you're at on your journey. I feel like people appreciate that more, firstly, and they can see it for what it actually is. And you don't go to bed with that question of self-doubt. You know, you don't wake up with that question of self-doubt, like, oh, what do people
because
think
you told
of me?
it to someone, basically, because you basically kind of like,
because you're
almost
just
sounds to me
wearing
like
it.
you're unloading it to like someone else, you know, like here is the trick, like I fucked up, here it is, look at it, and then you sleep better.
Yeah, it's more like how do I want to phrase it? It's more just being true to who you are, right? Whereas if you're carrying around these different masks that you put on, one in public, one for your family, one for your friends, like, people are very good at least I think people are very good at seeing through bullshit, at least the people that I know. And like the thing is like, if you're not bullshitting in general, like if you're being honest with yourself in what you're doing, then people are going to see that. Like, you can't hide your truth. Like, you can try, like the gym, for example, or eating healthy or sleeping, or like, people are going to see, you know, whether you're actually being consistent with that stuff. And the voice in my head is a lot quieter when I'm approaching my own day-to-day routine by being honest with myself. And then in turn, through being honest with myself, you are then naturally honest with everyone else, because you're just accepting, right? You're accepting of your reality, you're accepting of who you are as a person, you're accepting of your capabilities and whatnot. And you don't feel any shame in having to hide things, or, you know, the whole imposter syndrome, or trying to make up for something that you don't have.
Yeah, you see, I think that there's a difference here. There are like two themes. One of them is the imposter syndrome as it relates to how you present yourself to others. And the other one is being honest to yourself.
Yeah.
And critical. Because it almost feels to me like there is something that happens. It's kind of hard for me to completely put a finger on it, but there's something that happens in the dynamic you have with yourself. Like, I'm talking now specifically about you. When you use this transparency, I should say, like, method, you know, you say like, I'm going to share everything because then nothing can happen, because then no one could judge me, because I was honest anyway. And I think that there's some mechanism of protection in this method that you're utilizing that I would at least challenge for yourself and say, okay, look, is this actually a belief that serves me or not? That if I share it, does it actually make it better, essentially? For example, let's say I don't know, let's say, okay, I have, yeah, let's say I have a commitment to myself. I said, I'm going to wake up every day at 6 a.m. and work on the company. And then on the second day, I slack off and don't show up. On the third day, I meet someone like my business partner. And I would say like, you know what? I fucked it up. I slacked off yesterday. I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I think there's almost strength to not saying that and saying like, look, I'm working on my shit. I'm not deceiving him and lying, but like, this is my responsibility. And the reason that I care so much about it is because of me. I don't care about them in the sense of the way they see me. I only care about what I think about myself, because that's the only thing that matters. And that's like the difference between, like, the imposter syndrome is something that happens to yourself. Like, you think you basically think you're a fraud, which implies kind of you're not worthy, which in some ways doesn't even have to do with other people and the way they see you. They might see you completely different. It's just like the way you sort of like see yourself. And I would at least challenge the belief and say, do I actually need to share all vulnerabilities to be true and real? Or is it something that has some short-term benefits to me where I can allow myself to, I'm not really sure I think that there are some benefits that you seek out of like sharing the vulnerability or mistakes with others that not necessarily benefit you long or even short term. But I can't put a full pulse in it. I would say like I would just like challenge this belief. Maybe something just to digest. I might also be completely wrong on this one. And then the other belief that I thought is you talk about this. I wake up and do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, right? Like there's the morning routine, the gym, not slacking off here, 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 and here. And the first thing that I think is like, I would challenge the belief that this is all necessary, because I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but if you cultivate the belief that this is necessary, then once it falls away, you have a reason to slack off, because then
that's very true.
Right? Then you need it essentially.
Yeah.
But if you wake up and say, it doesn't matter if it's 2 p.m., I'm going to get my shit in, you just go ahead and do it, because you are stronger than the habits you build. You're just you. You just wake up and you do your stuff. And then you say, well, actually, so let's say I would wake up at 1 p.m. and say, fuck, I actually am going to quit working at 6 p.m. So I only have 5 hours. Let's fucking do it. And then at the end of the day, I'm telling myself, you know, I think it would be easier to wake up at 8 a.m. and trying to do this thing than at 1. Yeah. But no matter what happens, I'm going to get my hours in. But this was a dumb way to do it. I'm going to wake up tomorrow at 1, but I don't need it to get going. It just helps overall. And then the thing is, like, if you believe that, let's say 6 things are necessary for success, it also makes the barrier for success like way less reachable on a day-by-day basis, because you need to hit all 6. Otherwise, you have a problem. I mean, this is like overly, I'm like overemphasizing the point, but like, if you do really have a belief system that this is that important, necessary, like it might work out well for X or Y or Espen, but I think what I would challenge yourself and like what you, like, I think what you would be most proud of is if you can say, I just get my stuff done either way, but I choose to wake up at 6 because I feel a drive that I like. That's why I do it, not because I need it. It's just because I like, that's the way I like to roll. And that's all. Yeah. And then if you wake up at 9, you don't have to explain or justify it to anyone. You don't even share it. You just do your thing at 9 and then tell yourself, you know what? I think I would feel more badass and cool about myself to wake up at 6. That's why I'm going to do that tomorrow. And I'm not going to share that with anyone to wake up at 6. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like that, I think then you start building an internal dialogue, which is more centered around what you believe about yourself. And if you remove, like, you basically outsource the greatness to a mix of the habits and other people. You say, I owe my greatness to this guy and this guy and this guy. And I also owe my greatness and my future success and my current success to this habit, and this habit. But the reality is you don't owe anything. That's just you. You have accomplished this or you have fucked it up. It's only you. And that's it. And if you externalize it, you kind of create distance and you say, well, even if you did have success, it wasn't you. You're still an imposter because it was only the fruits of Espen and your habits that got you to point X.
Yeah. I fucking love that. I'm gonna look forward to watching this back, because you just dropped some bombs. So kind of creating the relationship with yourself where your surrounding environment doesn't matter, the time of day doesn't matter, all of those things that people maybe emphasize too much on, kind of removing those filters, if you will, and being like, okay, regardless of what's fucking going on, I'm just going to get shit done. Sounds a lot like a good friend of ours, or I was going to say good friend of ours, but someone that we've looked up to a lot, David Goggins, just kind of that, like, I don't give a shit.
Do?
Yeah,
what would Goggins do? It's like, oh, fuck, I woke up at 2 p.m. What would Goggins do? Just get your shit in anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Just do it anyway. And then also not even share it. Just like get it in. And also there was one more thing that you said that I want to go back to.
The editor's going to kill me, man.
1 second. I think
it's like 3-hour podcast. It's like, yeah, no worries. We'll go for 2 max.
Cut it out. Don't edit or cut it out. But there was one important thing that you said I really want to re-emphasize. And I think, yes, rebuilding. You're not
Okay.
rebuilding. Because no, you're not. Because even if you, first of all, you cannot go back in time, period.
Okay.
And you will never be the same guy you were before, period. You're only moving in one, like in forward direction. There's nothing to build back to. Even if you build the same role that you had back then at some point, you're not at the same point at all in your life. You're you're a different person, different skill sets, different mindset, different position in your life, different age. There's no rebuild in place. You're not catching up with anything. You're only moving in one direction. You cannot go back. You cannot make it undone. That's what I'm trying to say. If you rebuild, it almost sounds like you can reverse it, and you can't. And you got to live with that. And that's fine. Like, you're moving forward. And if you are at 100, 200K at some point, you're in a new point, and there's only one person to applaud to, which is to yourself. Doesn't mean you can't say, I want to thank you and you, but you did it. It was no one else. You did it. And it wasn't your habits. It was just you. And you need to start giving yourself all the credit to start off, and then maybe later start thinking about how to move the credit around.
Yeah.
But if you don't give yourself the credit, you will end up with the same imposter issues as before. Because that's the difference between imposter and not, is you say, I am the guy. I did it. I have the skills.
I feel like there's a very fine line though, right, between having that relationship with yourself and more importantly, like talking with yourself like that internally, to then the way you talk about yourself to other people and in public. Because there's a fine line of, confidence and then just arrogance, right?
Yep.
But yeah, what you just said there, like I see it. It's another one of those things where it's very easy to see in other people, but very difficult to realize it in yourself. Because one of the things that I am known for, at least I would think I am, when it comes to like my close friends, is when they belittle themselves or they don't give themselves the credit that they deserve. And I'm very quick to just be like, hey, like, don't fucking talk about yourself like that. Like, you are doing these things, you're doing this, that, like, you need to,
because you know the pain of that underlying, because you're doing it to yourself.
Yeah. There we go. Jesus Christ. We're having a sofa session with JNandez. Man, listen, cool. You're someone that I could talk to for hours, and I proof in case we're hitting the 3 hour mark, but this conversation
that's good.
Is just further proof that I'm so glad I reached out to you. You're one of the first people that came to mind when I came up with the idea to do this, and I really do believe that a lot of people are going to take a lot of value away from everything that you've mentioned. Going to be dropping a lot of stuff in the show notes in the description box, from, like I said, Farnham Street to mental models to PLO Mastermind to your social medias. But before we wrap things up, the final fast five. Are you
How does it
ready?
work?
So the final fast five, really simple, single word or short sentence answers to my questions. And I ask the same questions to all of my guests. So there is no, I can't have people like, oh, you asked Phil Galfond easy questions and you asked, So this is more of a broader question to give to the general population. The first question is a piece of advice that you would give to the 20-year-old version of yourself, if you could. And by yourself, I mean everyone else. Like everyone else that's 20, a single piece of advice.
Think big.
I love that. Okay. If you could create a poker law or rule that everybody had to follow, what would it be? It always gets people, this one.
I think it would be like good, in a broad way, good table manners, including showering, not eating, and then touching the chips. Anything with hygiene, basically. Just, get your shit together in terms of hygiene at the table, please.
Yeah, start bringing fucking deodorant to the casino, you bastards that are grinding 48 hours straight. Like, yeah, I love that. Obviously, COVID has had a massive impact on everyone globally, and I think the main thing that has happened through COVID is there's been a lot of self-reflection and people have been having realizations. And my question, third question from the final first five is, what is the biggest lesson you've learned in the last year, the last 12 months?
From COVID or in general?
Just, yeah, your last 12 months in terms of growth or whatever it is, biggest lesson.
Let's say you choose and choose wisely what your beliefs are.
You choose and choose wisely what your beliefs are.
Yeah.
Do you mind delving a little bit deeper into that one?
Sure. I think language is something I was always obsessed with language since I was very young. And the words people use specifically are very much telling about how they think, because how they speak is how they think about the world and themselves. So I think listening very closely to yourself, that's why you should write things down, because then you can see exactly what words you're using to describe what exactly. And if you listen closely to your own sentences, not you specifically, but just people in general, you realize that you're making a lot of statements about the world and the way it is and it isn't, and the way you are and the way you are and you aren't. And all of that, like 99% of that is not factual. It is not factual. It is just something that you decided on, or someone else, like your parents, decided this is the way it is. And you should really challenge that and ask yourself, but is it true? And also, most importantly, does that belief benefit me or not?
I love that.
Yeah, and then just say, no, I don't. And I stop believing it from now on. And then you just don't believe it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. That's that one's that's a banger. Thank you. What is happening in the poker space that is exciting you for the future of poker?
Oh, that's a difficult question. What is exciting me? Yeah, I would say it's good that this is at the end of the podcast. People moving out of poker, and I'm excited about that because I know how much transition can mean, and I'm also in some ways looking to help these people, right? With, for example, podcasts like this, where I'm not just like tooting my own horn about my business, but also talk about how something like that can actually be done. And I do think that there are a lot of lives to be helped in the next couple of years to make poker not their full-time income anymore.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on and approaching this conversation in that way as well, rather than I mean, there are plenty of podcasts out there where it's all the guest wants to do is just like show how great they are, you know, all these things. But I definitely appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to kind of share some of the things that you've learned, some of the mistakes that you've made along the way to get you to where you are now, in the hopes that, you know, people can take some of the things you said and kind of implement it into their own personal journey. So I'm personally very grateful for that. So thank you. Final question: favorite person lifetime to have battled against during your poker career? One name above all else. Who is it?
So all the people that I think about when it comes to battling, I just hate fucking battling against them. I never love it. It's like this fucking guy.
Now as a non-pro, that you can kind of look back and admire and appreciate their tenacity or greatness or whatever it is. So I know you battled with some absolute legends. I mean,
who do I not? Who is like someone favorite person to battle? I'm just gonna say this. To me, there's only one poker hero in my sphere that I always admired, and I played with and against him, but never really battled it out. But for me, Ben86 is just the GOAT and always will be. And we haven't battled in that sense. We played. Probably doesn't even know exactly who I am, but he's the only guy that I went up in the Bellagio and said, Ben86, and he said yes, and I said, you're a legend. And he was very surprised by the comment.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much for giving me 3 hours of your time. I've honestly just been sat here and taken in everything that you've had to say with open ears and an open mind, and I hope everyone at home has approached it with the same way, because there's a lot of stuff that you shared with us today that I
was cool.
Yeah,
my last sentence for this podcast.
Let's do it.
After all this came together, here's my last sentence that I this is what I take away from this, okay? You don't, and at the same time do, need someone that tells you that you're great. In that the same instance, first of all, you need more people that just approve of who you are as you are, with all the fuck ups and all the mistakes. And then once you took that in, you long-term don't need anyone to tell you that, because you're just great the way you are, you know? Like, I think with all the things you said, when I think about you, I take all these things into account and think you're great. Even if you wouldn't change any of those things, I would still think you're great. That's the way I think about you personally. Specifically. Exactly. You don't need to change anything in order to be recognized as a valuable person that brings a ton of value and is just a great individual, even if you change not a single bit.
Thank you, man. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, Fernando, JNandez, Habegger, thank you so much for your time, man. I cannot wait to get this out there. Yeah, that's it. Boom.